Just in relation to apologies, members will be aware that Mitchell McLaughlin has withdrawn from his roles on committees for the time being due to his principal deputy speaker engagements. Are there any other apologies? I don't think so. No? No. Move on then to agenda item number 2, Chairperson's business. Policy Forum for Northern Ireland. The paper for this item is at page number 5. I've been asked to speak as Chair of the Committee at the Policy Forum for Northern Ireland Seminar on Energy Policy in Northern Ireland the 17th September 2015. So, well, we could probably agree in principle that the chairperson, be it me or be it anybody else, then could attend that. Okay. Agreed.
Are you speaking, Patsy? Aye.
Pardon?
Are you going? Have you speaking role?
Well, they've invited me along in capacity as chair of the committee, so.
Aye, but are you speaking, or are you just going to attend the conference?
No, it's speaking role.
Aye. So we can get a copy of your speech and maybe it made. Would that be all right? We'll see what you're saying, you know.
Oh, aye, it's just absolutely.
See what your key priorities are.
I'm just nearly a year away, you know. Next year. That's why I'm saying whether it's myself or anybody else, you know.
Be a chair of the committee in that stage.
Okay. Now, next item is Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce and Industry event. Tabled today as correspondence from Anne McGregor, Chief Executive of the Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce, and an invitation to myself to participate in the event. Corporation tax seizing the opportunity to be held on Tuesday the 21st of October, that's this year, 2014, from 8:15 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. So if members are content for myself to attend on behalf of the committee and anybody else, I'm sure the invite's extended to anyone else that wishes to attend. Particularly opportune that they're doing this as we're doing our other stuff and the around corporation tax, and there'll be a bit more about that later on today. So as we hear about the PR aspects of what we're doing on that, because what I'm picking up from a lot of stakeholders out there already is there's a fair bit of interest whenever I explain to them as to what we're doing. They're very interested in the committee and very excited indeed about the work that the committee is about to undertake. Okay, so members content for myself to attend, and anyone else I presume wants to go along to that event, just notify the committee office. Now, next item is visit to SDC Trailers. Day of the meeting, the committee will be visiting SDC Trailers next Thursday, the 2nd of October at 10:30 a.m. Now, that's followed by lunch and all is provided. Now, this is a company which is growing, which is doing very well for itself in the development of trailers and that, but there are issues around the place where they have highlighted the skills deficit, for example, welders. So it'd be very useful for members to hear firsthand from a successful company, but also from the issues that arise with that. So if members could give us an indication as to who's attending, please. The last time we were due to attend, members couldn't attend, and it kind of fell apart. So yes, Gordon.
Yes.
Obviously, I'll be attending myself. So Phil.
What's the I'm scheduled to go. What's the timings? Just
10:30.
10:30. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. I'll be there.
Paul. Okay. And no,
I'm not sorry, Chair.
Can't go. You have the renewables event.
How about that? An Nolan show.
That's the Nolan show, is right. That's talkback.
Thanks.
Oh, right. Now, can we move to the next item, which is, in fact, following on from our previous item, having done a lot of valuable preparatory work, both at our planning day and indeed to follow up about corporation tax and what the committee should be focusing on itself in the line of its activities, we agreed that I had a chat with Jim afterwards that we need to do a wee bit more publicity around it. In fact, a good bit more publicity around it to tell the world that we're doing things that are of significance and importance to them. So anyway, part of that was the establishment of a Twitter account specifically geared for the activities of this committee. So following today's meeting, the Assembly Web Manager Chris Taylor and Information Officer Deborah Savage from the Assembly's Communications Office will briefly outline for the committee details of the proposed new ETI Committee Twitter account. So hope nobody takes that.
The Vice Chair, is he managing it?
Pardon, Gordon?
Is the Vice Chair managing it?
Can't manage his own.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that, Megan. So Right, and there is another issue around October monitoring. Normally we would have had, or we should have had the papers today, but as everyone knows, there's a bit of a financial management exercise going on of about £200 million worth of stuff. So I rated it, whenever Jim explained that to me, I rated that as fairly exceptional. So now, it is for members to see, and I'm going to gauge opinion here now, if they feel like we should call a meeting maybe on Tuesday, whenever the monitoring figures become available, to look through them, or whether members are content, we'll go with this just on this occasion and leave it for now. So I'm in your hands.
Well, have you any indication, Patsy, as to when we're going to get papers?
No, I think a lot of it's going to be due to how well or otherwise things progress at the executive meeting today, Phil.
Yeah. But if something's agreed to the executive today, we'll hardly have papers before Tuesday, will we?
Genuinely don't know.
Due to be
Well, Jim, they have to be with DFP this day week, so
Right.
presumably they would need to have them ready.
Sure, are we meeting on Tuesday anyway? Just at the start of
No, it's the following week, Sam. Aye. But we could convene for half an hour to go through that if required, you know. So I'm in your hands, whichever.
Well, if the papers are there and there's something to discuss, we...
Right, what we'll do is, probably the best thing is, and I'm available and Jim will be available, as soon as the papers arrive, we'll have them emailed around members. And if members feel that there's an important issue that needs to be discussed, we'll convene a special meeting on Tuesday then. Happy enough?
Right.
Okay, great then.
And officials on standby.
And officials on standby.
What time are you thinking of?
Well, we'll see, what are you talking about? Maybe over lunch? There's nothing else on, is there? No?
10?
Well, good. Let's see, is there anything else on Tuesday?
I suppose, Chair,
All
it
party.
might depend on if and when the papers come as well. So members are happy enough for me to try and get the meeting as early as possible. Would
Yes.
would that do, and let members know if it's going to happen?
Yes. Okay, as soon as the papers come, then we'll be in touch.
The earlier the better, I think.
I know, but... So... Okay, move to the next... Oh yeah, and the other item was to that, following on from that, depending on what's contained in it and what changes and the likes are there, it might be important that we have an urgent meeting with the Minister to discuss the implications and import of those decisions from the monitoring round. So agreed that we go that course as well.
If required, yeah.
Aye, yeah. Okay, right, we'll move to the next item then. Draft minutes, this is agenda item number 3, and that's included at page 9. This is the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of September 2014. So are members content with the detail and accuracy of the minute?
Great.
Yes, okay. Now, there's another item coming up later on, it's about the trip to Brussels, but we'll deal with that then, and whether or not we go on the Assembly Business Trust trip, fact-finding trip there as well. So do you want to deal with that now as matters
It'll be
raised?
under
or-
matters rising.
Yeah,
We can
okay.
usually
Okay, we'll deal with that later on then, so. Now, next item is number 4, the oral briefing from the Northern Ireland Hotels Federation, and the presentation for this is included in the papers at page 21. And briefing the committee today from the Northern Ireland Hotels Federation are Miss Janice Galt, who's the Chief Executive, and Miss Mandy Patrick, who's the President. You're very, very welcome indeed. It's good to see you again, and thanks for attending and coming to the committee today. So, really, you've been explained to you. Just the floor is yours, and if you could give us an overview as to the main themes. We've already received your briefing documents and read through them, and there's a number of issues and points in those. I'm sure that'll be explored by members afterwards. So you just take us through the broad themes, the broad important areas of what you regard as important to the industry at the moment, and maybe what we should be doing to support you in that regard. So floor is now yours.
Good morning, and thank you very much for allowing us this opportunity to come and see you all today. This is on the back of our Tourism 2020 document, which Patsy was so kind enough to launch for us just around a year ago. And many of you we've already met individually, and trying to take you through what we see as the important issues around our industry. As you've had all the details before, I suppose it'd be better handing over to Janice, because this is her day job, so that she can take you through some of the detail. I suppose I just would like to say that the Hotels Federation we do represent 85% of the hotel stock in Northern Ireland, and we do contribute £161 million in salaries to the Northern Ireland economy. So we can only hope that this will help us to grow and make a greater contribution.
Thank you. Right.
When we did quite a lot of economic research to produce this report, and one of the things we looked at was that hotels simply don't trade in isolation. So the report is around the wider economic structure of tourism within Northern Ireland. We came out of that 5 key asks for us. The first one being a tourism strategy, but in reality at this stage really a future study of the industry to work out what tourism is going to look like over the next 2 decades. It sounds like a very short, very long period of time, but in reality to train people into the industry does take a period of time, as does capital infrastructure. The third thing we looked at was taxation. In relation to VAT, APD and other matters around the actual fiscal structure of the industry. We looked at trading, which is really how we trade, how that's currently constructed in terms of who promotes what and how much money is spent on it. And the last thing we looked at was training in relation to where we're getting people to come into the industry, what jobs we have to offer, and the other fiscal aspects of that. We've worked out that with certain changes within the economy, we could actually bring an additional about £132 million over as far as about 2021. We've also worked out that we could increase job numbers by some 5,000 within hotels alone, without multiplying out into the wider industry. And the economic cost of actually not providing a VAT reduction is about £128 million. There's been quite a bit of work subsequently done on this on a UK-wide basis, and the most recent reports would show that over 10 years that the Treasury would actually benefit from some £3.6 billion.
That's as a direct result of...
As a direct result of a VAT
stimulus
reduction.
created to the economy in your sector from VAT reduction.
The VAT reduction would be over 2 specific areas, which is serviced accommodation and hotels and visitor attractions in the first aspect of it. That would be where the actual additional funds would come from. There's actually a multiplier effect for hotels. Currently for every 3 jobs in a hotel, you have a job elsewhere. The idea would be to move that up. Hotels have directly used 132 other businesses in their everyday trading, everything from laundry through to maintenance, painting. There's a lot of sort of things that rely on that. But for us, we see us as sort of like a centre part of the industry, but we realise that the other bits and pieces have to be bolted onto that. And really for us, the wider picture within the local economy is to make sure that things here grow. This is an industry that can bring something to every constituency. It really can't be exported in many ways, but it is something that can bring something to every constituency. I suppose the real argument is that tourism is in fact an export, because you are bringing people into an environment that they're not normally in and they're using it, and therefore we are the only export that is subject to 20% VAT. The concern for us on a sort of a more local basis is internationally we are promoted as a single island destination, even in Great Britain. So when we go out, we are actually currently 11% dearer than our counterparts in the south, who've benefited from a 9% tax rate since 2011, and who currently have no APD, which means people can actually pay no air passenger duty to arrive in Dublin, and also are faced with a VAT rate that is 11% less than ourselves. Figures would show that they've created about 30,000 jobs as a result of the VAT rate, and that was a 4% reduction. And those jobs have been spread throughout the south and through each individual county. We could see a similar effect for us. We did a piece of work showing a weekend in Cork versus a weekend in Belfast, and the only difference is that Belfast actually becomes very uncompetitive. There's quite a major difference from our point of view, and we do worry that this will actually hold us back in the longer term. And we see this as, we really think that while some of these matters, that is a Westminster issue, we hope that it will come up in the general election, that it will focus down into the party manifestos. Training, the future study, the strategy and things like that are actually the gift of the Assembly, and we would like to see those things brought forward.
Very good, thank you. So what I'm hearing from you is there are some aspects of the Scottish referendum and the buzz that has created around fiscal powers and VAT or taxation reduction or increase in powers that might be just beneficial to ourselves. Whenever I hear that.
Mm-hmm. If VAT currently is an EU directive,
yes.
So there would actually have to be changes within the way that VAT is set up. Crown dependencies like the Isle of Man have a 5% VAT rate on hotels, and they're allowed to because they're a Crown dependency. If there is a devolution bill put through, there would have to be changes made which would allow that to take place. In reality, VAT would have to be set at 5% across the UK for everybody to trade in the same way, and certainly businesses that are outside London, in the sort of the south of England, businesses that are in Wales and businesses that are in Scotland, really have felt the draft of tourism. And feel that for their point of view, a 5% VAT rate could make a huge difference.
5 or 9?
5 would be the current thing is that VAT within the UK would drop to 5% because we currently have 3 VAT rates, 0, 5 and 20. To introduce a new VAT rate according to the Treasury takes a huge amount of money. You can move a VAT rate up or down as long as everything stays in it, but to actually create an additional VAT rate presents quite an additional cost. So the idea is that you would drop to the current 5% VAT rate. There's been quite a bit of work done on this, both taking the Treasury model in an economic way that's actually covered by the Official Secrets Act. So only people that have signed it are allowed. I have not signed it and I'm not an economist. But they have actually looked at that and have shown that within 3 years there would be an equitable position where the Treasury would be sort of quids in, wouldn't make a difference. But the general model that economists use is called a dynamic model, where you take the multiplier effect, and based on that, from really year one, reducing VAT would be fiscally very beneficial. You have a drop in benefits, an increase in jobs and an increase in taxation, which actually nets off the actual loss that you gain from VAT.
Yes, I did a wee bit of viewing on this myself there recently, and I saw where south of the border they dropped from 13.5 down to 9%, and as a result of that the net income to the sector rose by about 44%, and the number of jobs created were over 21,000, and obviously those people are paying back in by way of income tax and I suppose increased expenditure on VAT, although at a lesser rate. So I don't know, I suppose someone somewhere has worked it out that if you have more people buying more services, even if it is at a lower rate of VAT, you're getting more VAT in, more income in.
You get in more VAT over a longer term, but the other benefit that you get is when you actually break down how you spend it, you actually get a multiplier that actually allows you to do things that actually add to the economy.
Yes.
At the moment, there's only three countries in Europe that don't avail of a reduced tax rate or reduced VAT rate. The reason that tourism falls into that sector is because of the actual labour content. Most hotels are sitting at a labour content of plus 30%. So that's one cost that you actually you can't reduce. You can't actually have half a receptionist or quarter of a chef. You've got to have a certain complement of staff costs. And when they looked at it in the south, they worked out too that from, as well as actually increasing the number of people that they had, they actually saved jobs because people didn't have to cut jobs when the actual recession hit. So it was a real winner. But other countries have done this as well. I mean, France, Spain, Germany. The only country that has no reduced VAT rate at all is Denmark. They have 25%. But we are there's only 3 other countries that do not avail of the ability to introduce a reduced rate.
Right, okay. Just a general question. What about the hotel occupancy rates in the last year or two? Are they on the increase, or have you noticed any difference, or what way is it basically?
The figure for hotel occupancy, according to the NISRA figure, is about 69%, which is slightly lower than it had been previously. The real challenge for us has been the rate versus the occupancy. Hotels trade really around three figures: average daily rate, your occupancy, and your revenue per average room. We had a period of where 38 months those figures fell until April 2012. They have started to stabilise, but we certainly are not back to, figures show a slight rise in room rate. I think the room rate last year ended up in around the £65 mark. The problem is that that has not gone up to cover costs such as inflation and things like that. When people hear 69%, they hear it's quite a bad figure. I suppose the reverse of that is that 31% of your rooms are empty.
Yes. Just later on now, and I don't expect you to have the immediate answer to this, but we're looking at programme for government commitments and milestone targets and the likes of that. And I'm looking at, where are we? The figures that are quoted here is that there were 3.97 million total overnight visitors in 2012 against a revised figure, a PFG 2012 target of 3.87, so they're saying they're up by 100,000, with associated expenditure from these visitors at 683 million against a target of 597 million. And again for the next year, for 2013, they're referring to associated expenditure from visitors being at 723 million. I'm just trying to, what you're telling me about occupancy and it not really changing that much, I'm not so sure where these figures for the programme for government's coming from.
The NISRA figures, they're from NISRA. The NISRA figures show our figure in about 2008, 2009 would have been in the 70s. It's now 69. So if you take it as a sort of an overall figure, in the period of time it actually has started to climb again slightly, but it hasn't actually, considerably increased.
Right.
That is, more bedrooms have been sold because there's been some stock added, but certainly the overall recovery is not particularly strong. It's taken us longer to recover than it has taken other industries. That is the way it's worked out.
Has your total number of bedrooms, has that increased or decreased? Has it?
The current number of bedrooms is just under 8,000. It's increased by about between 2 and 3% over the last 4 to 5 years. The biggest increase would have been from 2007 to 2009, where it increased by sort of double-digit figures.
So, I'm just trying to get a picture here. Your figure is about 69%, but has it dropped or increased a bit, or is it just more or less?
It's more or less really the same in reality. It's more or less really the same.
Okay, right. That's grand. Thanks very much. Members' questions now. I have Mr. Dunn. Gordon.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much for your presentation this morning. Event tourism, how do you see the significance of event tourism to the hotel sector? Do you think it makes a major impact?
Major events are the way to change the landscape of tourism. There's no question about that. They have three benefits. Number one, they bring additional hotel bedrooms, which is the direct effect for our members. Secondly, they open up the tourist product to a wider audience. And thirdly, if they are a world-class event, they give you the opportunity to showcase on a world stage. They give us the opportunity to get a good news story about this region out into the world press.
And we gain from that?
Yes.
Repeat orders, really? Do you get a lot of repeat business as a result?
If you have somebody who comes here and they go back and they advocate coming here, that is the greatest tool that we actually have. So a good example would be the Giro d'Italia. People see the Giro d'Italia on television, they see that it's in Belfast. Cyclists look at those courses when they're not here or if they didn't come, and then they would decide to come back and cycle that particular course. I suppose a very good example really would be golf. Last night on television was, I want to go and play in Northern Ireland, and that is really what we need, is people to go out and say there's a big event. the chances of you getting the same coverage from the British Open or the Irish Open on a small event are very limited. Whereas if you have an event where you can actually bring world-class players and the media show that goes with it, you actually have the opportunity to promote.
So you feel it should be a priority
Yes.
within the tourism strategy
Yes.
for Northern Ireland? Does it justify the expenditure, millions of pounds we spent on the Giro on such events?
You've got to work out the economic benefit of that. For every pound you spend, you've got to work out what you're getting back. Tourism 2012 brought us a fantastic year. It actually turned our industry around. If you don't do major events, you basically don't have the ability to compete. We see everything in terms of what we spend. For every pound that is spent, there is a return. So the more business we can do, and I'm not just talking about hotels, the more business everybody in the industry can do, the more economic contribution we can make, and therefore we can give more money to the Treasury and to the Assembly, therefore giving you more money to play with.
There's a huge spin-off from it.
Yes.
Right. The 8,000 hotels, does that include 8,000 bed spaces, does that include small hotels?
Includes every property. There's 137 hotels in Northern Ireland. The average number of rooms per hotel is currently 56. So it includes every hotel. The current legal position is you have to have more than 15 bedrooms to be a hotel.
Yeah. So
And there's about 2 hotels, I think, of less than that, but they actually trade under an Old Hotel Act and are entitled to do so.
okay. As a representative from Norristown, we feel we would love to see more hotel investment in places like Bangor. New hotel is drastically needed. It's been looked at on a number of occasions. But the issue is we're competing with Belfast. Is there too much bed space in Belfast?
There is a new hotel coming to Bangor the end of this year, maybe early next year, which is the Premier Inn.
Well, it has been talked about. I'm aware of that. Yeah.
But it is, I believe, according to their managing director, it is coming. You have, within 25 miles of Belfast, you have 4,600 hotel bedrooms, and Belfast city centre is shrinking.
See, over half.
Yeah, you have 17% of the province's hotel bedrooms along one street.
I know. See, that's the problem. Well, the problem there is like Norristown. Why travel to Bangor if you're coming in business if there's not a modern hotel there?
Well, if you look at maybe it's that will demand a different type of hotel. You have a number of properties that trade in the periphery of Bangor that trade very well. Clandyboy Lodge, the Old Inn, the Culloden, which trade particularly well in a slightly different market. You've got to work out the economics of it, and you've got to make a return for 365 days of the year. There is always room for a new product, but it depends where you are and what you can actually offer. Some people don't want to stay in town, and some people do.
Yeah, well, that's right.
And it's how you actually market accordingly.
Years ago, we would have been more attractive. When the Troubles were on, people would have moved out and wanted to stay outside of Belfast, and we would have gained significantly from that. But people now tend to stay in Belfast and get the buzz of Belfast and so on, and have everything under the one roof. When they stay there, they have their drinks license, premises. Is that an issue? People like to stay in the one place, have their meals, and socialise in the same venue.
I think if hoteliers were in that position, they would be joyful, because most people come and stay in hotels and then go out. People like to have sort of things that are around them.
Yeah.
Bangor suffers from a sort of a seaside resort demise, which is the subject of the Tourism and Media Committee in Westminster. A number of seaside towns that have had that traditional family holiday have sort of gone down the route of faded elegance in some ways. Other cities and other destinations have effectively curbed that by actually changing their appeal. Scarborough, Brighton would be good examples of that.
We're working on it in Bangor and have been for years, as you're aware. Just finally, is there enough been done to change the customer experience for people that do come here? Staff training, I see, has been mentioned. I think it's important that when people come, they get they don't not only get a good product, but that they're treated properly, and that the hospitality that we have here comes across. People are mannerly in what to do, and
I think the customer experience tends to be quite good. We tend to be quite hard on ourselves. I think having something that is internationally recognised and something that will attract people to come into the industry is an important thing. There's got to be training that actually means something to people and a career path that actually works effectively. If you're a customer, you're expecting an authentic welcome. You don't necessarily want have a nice day and sort of a very homogenous American-based welcome. You want something that is local. We're quite lucky in that we have a large local population involved in the industry. There is always room for improvement in customer service, and there's no question about that. But most people leave here. Our problem isn't really with people when we get them here. Our problem is actually getting people to come here.
great. You've done well. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Chair. Yep. Mr. Flanagan, Phil.
Thanks, Patsy, and thanks for the presentation. It's good to see you again. I don't want to dwell on the issue of VAT, just want to state that we support a reduction in the VAT of the tourism and hospitality sectors here. Unfortunately, we don't have the power to do it, but we'll support the campaign. Is there enough for you talk about there's a problem getting people here, there's no problem when they are here. Mm-hmm. Is there a problem of there being enough for families and young children to do when they are here? Is that a problem that's picked up by your members?
The family market is a market that a number of our members serve very well. Mm-hmm. We don't have an Alton Towers or a Disneyland or something like that, but we do have a wide open space product. We have a pretty safe environment. We have a lot of natural beauty and a number of very good seaside products that work quite well. The family product is sort of spread quite well over a range of accommodation sectors, hotels being one.
Sorry, I'm talking about things like kids clubs and hotels and things like that. Is that something that many of your members would offer?
Quite a number of them do offer kids clubs, yes. Okay. They offer a kids club over the 8 weeks of the summer, or they will, a number of them, for example, will partner with Belfast Zoo, will partner with Explorus, will do that as a sort of an add-on. They will look at different aspects of a large number of them do offer leisure facilities, which people tend to like to use, or they will have a kids' tea at tea time, or the joy of a child's disco, which is worth going to.
Okay. I'd pass, eh? Enough discussion about my own house without going to another one. What's happening with the Tourism Innovation Fund? That's been pulled. The Tourist Board have pulled funding for that. Have you any understanding what impact that's going to have?
It means the projects that have already been assigned money won't get them. So it'll be a question of working down through those and see if there's another route source that they can go to. This is an industry about innovation. It's an industry about innovation and entrepreneurship, and it is difficult to access funding. So if that goes as a route, some products simply won't get off the ground.
And were there many of your members that were applying into the fund?
No.
Is there we hear about a two-tier recession and a two-tier recovery. Is there a difference in the performance of the tourism sector in urban areas compared with rural areas? Is there an overemphasis on city breaks and things like that, as opposed to trying to get people out into rural areas and staying in rural hotels?
If you look at the rural population and you look at Fermanagh, for example, you will find that the Fermanagh hotel average rate is actually higher than some of the urban districts. If you take Derry versus Fermanagh, the actual rate in Fermanagh is significantly higher.
I was actually talking about a place like Bangor, out in the middle of nowhere.
Where's Bangor getting hammered?
Bangor being a fantastic location located very close to Belfast. Your problem is really when you divide a location into concentric circles. So if you look at a city which is your inner circle, and then you move to the outskirts, the way your outskirts like Templepatrick, Bangor, Newtownards benefit is if your city fills, people will move to those destinations. It's the Dublin corridor argument. So the more vibrant your city is, the better chance you have if you're trading on the outskirts of it. It's actually the best way of you doing it. If you have conferences in town, or you have meetings and your city's sitting at 90% full or 91% full, people will move to the outskirts. and particularly markets that are cost sensitive, and also people that don't necessarily want to stay in town when there's a large event on. So that is really the secret to it. You've sort of some urban hotspots. You have the Belfast that trade well, and then you have areas that go around that. But the secret is really to fill your cities and allow the ripple to go out. You also have slightly different hotels, which Lough Erne Resort, Slieve Donard would be an example of, which are resort hotels in their own right and will attract people, and they have performed well over the last year.
But like, I don't want you to, just because I'm from Fermanagh, I don't want you to pick the example of Fermanagh, because it has an awful lot to offer and always does well, and particularly does well with people coming from Greater Belfast to stay there. But I'm talking about other areas, with namely that maybe don't have the reputation for being a destination for visitors, and maybe don't have the natural product that Fermanagh has. Is there a problem in some of those rural areas in surviving?
There will be a problem in survival, but a lot of smaller hotels, particularly ones based in those type of locations, really occupy as what would be known as like a Hotel de Ville. They would be the hotel of the town.
Okay.
So if you take a small place like Omagh, one hotel trades very well. It's the hotel in the town that everybody goes to. A lot of their product is domestic based, and that will continue, and that has to continue, and that's a really good service to provide. But the idea would be that we could actually augment that by, maybe adding to the American Folk Park, the Ulster American Folk Park, and encouraging tourists to disperse out into the countryside.
Okay, and I hope you're not suggesting there's a problem with Omagh or nothing to do there.
Nothing to do. I'm not suggesting that at all.
Thanks, Patsy.
Mr. Agnew, Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the information so far. You mentioned a number of jobs that could be created if we reduce VAT. Politicians often say it's not just about creating jobs, but creating good quality jobs. The hospitality industry is generally considered to be low paid work in many cases. What, if anything, has been done to improve paying conditions for staff?
I think the conditions that you work in currently are relatively good. People often forget that within the hotel structure there are jobs that go in at the minimum wage level, but every hotel has a salesperson. Most hotels have an accountant. Some of them have general managers who earn six-figure sums. So it's not just simply everybody's in at minimum wage. There actually are a range of jobs, and once people move up the ladder, they are actually rewarded accordingly. I mean, supervisory jobs would be sitting in the mid-20s, managerial jobs are sitting in the 30s to 40s, so it's not just as simple as every job in the hospitality and hotel industry is at the lower level, because it's not.
In some ways I'm almost less concerned about the minimum wage jobs. When we discuss the issue of 0 hours, it's often the hospitality industry is used as the example why we can't get rid of them, because you rely on them so heavily. I don't know if that's an accurate description, but it's one that's often used as to why maybe we need to regulate 0 hours, but not ban them.
You'd probably have tiers of people. You would have 0 hours or casual workers and they're mostly students who you would use to fill in, but it also gives you the advantage for attracting people who, say, mothers that want to return to work, a whole range of people that maybe only want to work 16 hours and avail of some benefits and have time home with their families. And it's also a great vehicle for sort of the economically inactive to give them opportunities to get back into the workplace. And there's room for growth. Some people that maybe just haven't matured enough through education, get in, they learn the life skills, and then they're able to, through different training programs, avail of better paid jobs and move up the ladder. There's some very complicated jobs in hotels now, like revenue management, which is just, we're all selling like the airlines, and it's way above my head. Somebody better than me does that. But there's a whole gamut of that, and for socially, it also can have a great advantage.
The flip side, I suppose, is that if people are relying on 0 hour contracts as their main body of work, has the number of the use of 0 hours increased within the hospitality industry, do you know?
I wouldn't be able to give you a specific answer. I suspect that a number of people, the number of contract workers has changed. You only really use contract workers or 0 hours when you're very busy, so your core staff would remain as they are. But I wouldn't be able to give you a definitive answer as to the increase in it.
If you have the spikes, you do have cross-skilling, so you would have maybe housekeeping who would come back to help if you had a big dinner and things on, or at Christmas time, and you called on, everybody. It's not unusual for a HR manager to be out on the floor.
I suppose moving to the more positive side and following on to some of what Gordon asked about North Down, and indeed Phil about families. I feel Northern Ireland still has a long way to go in terms of how it serves particularly people pushing prams, and hopefully that'll change now as more men who are more often the case and are decision makers are pushing prams now, including myself. Hopefully we can start to change that. But I certainly know my partner picked cafes, restaurants, etc. based on where it was easiest to get round in a pram and where she could breastfeed and sort of relative privacy. Is that something that's been looked at by the industry?
I think the industry respond to market forces, and they have changed. There are family rooms, there are monitors, babysitting services, serving food later, making things more accessible to children. Unfortunately, I think the current figures show that 70% of decisions in relation to hospitality are made by women. So they tend to sort of focus on those particular things. This really boils down to the type of market that you want to attract, and we have pressed for a look to see who you want to come to Northern Ireland and what type of market you want to attract and what we have to do that. And a lot of what you ask for is something that is in the overall psyche, but it's how you actually attract that particular audience and what you have to. Each audience has its own nuances. The current situation is everybody in Northern Ireland does a little bit of everything. And that's the way it's going to continue because people have to survive. But most places are very accommodating. They have places to park buggies, they have high chairs. For hotels, it's about overnight accommodation, family rooms, building family rooms that are appropriate in size of space, and affording babysitting services. And most of them will look at that.
I have to say, hotels, to me, do a better job than, say, our retail and some of our, in fact, a lot of our kind of restaurants, etc. You mentioned family rooms, etc., travel cots, all that being provided, which has been great. But I use, for that to work as a whole, you need other businesses and other products doing the same thing. Do you work with other industries? And
Yes, we would.
Just finally, Chair, I think some places do it better than others, and that's where I will give a plug for North Down. I think increasingly Bangor's becoming very family friendly. It has good, North Down as a whole has good play parks, etc. We've got the likes of Picky Park and whatever, and certainly for local tourism, it might not be a reason to travel from America, but in terms of getting local tourism, sort of stay tourism to North Down, I think it's something we can build on. And I suppose if there is a new, well, it sounds like there is a new hotel coming to Bangor. It's been muted for some time. It certainly would be something that I'd be keen to stress, that actually I think it's one of the selling points of Bangor, because when I've moved from Belfast, I'm a blow-in, and when I moved in, I always had to go to Belfast to visit my friends because we were going out drinking, it's where the clubs were, etc. Now that we all have kids, they're coming to Bangor, and I think that's something we should be building on. If the hotel industry can play its part, it would be.
That's two plugs for Bangor already.
I give it a shout out too, Patsy.
And I didn't even mention Cookstown, or Marfeld.
I just wonder, was a presentation about Bangor?
It should be.
There must be someone related. They must go there.
That's why it's really, sorry.
Yeah,
I was just going to say it's very important to have that overarching futuristic piece done, so that when the tourism powers go to the new councils, that they have a more strategic plan that they can buy into, that they don't all run off and do scattergun effect of attractions or their needs, that they can buy into what has been set at a government level as to the direction of travel for tourism. And that takes in accommodation, your whole infrastructure, and then different areas then can sort of say what segment of the market do we attract, what have we natural or built product on our doorstep, and how we can take best advantage of that, because everybody can't be all things to all people.
Okay, thanks for that, man. Mr. Douglas, am I?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks so much for your presentation so far. I'd like to bring it back to the engine room of tourism.
Belfast.
Just East Belfast.
Well said, Mr. Douglas.
Stormont?
East side.
East Side. That's our new name, by the way. East Side. So, first of all, can I say about the VAT, I certainly concur with what's been said. I'd be very supportive, but I'm just wondering, Chair, there are obviously going to be major talks taking place between Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, as we've said, with the British government. Is there some way we could factor some of this stuff in, like that, so it's on the table?
Yep. I think those types of issues now were just to fill you in a wee bit on what the committee has decided. The committee has decided to organise a body of work principally around corporation tax, and how, not the discussion whether we should or shouldn't have it, but what should be done to prepare for the advent of increased FDI and those types of matters. So I'm sure the other issues around the edges, we can pursue those too, and with the inevitable talks that'll be coming, I'm sure they'll become a very important issue, both in Scotland and here, and I'm sure Wales will want to have a bit of the action there too. So I'd be very, very surprised if your counterparts in other regions such as Wales and Scotland wouldn't be raising the very same issues as part of those talks.
And I suppose that the reason why I say that as well is that when I look at some of the figures here, I have some of the figures from Titanic Belfast just for August. Does anybody know how many visitors there were to Titanic Belfast in August?
17.
Is this a game show?
And like had their biggest day of visitors one of the days.
And it's actually increased since last year, 102,000 in 1 month.
Many went to Bangor.
Where it says 6 months of Hollywood.
6.
That's probably right.
And that was only the 5-seater PR.
And I suppose one of the other surprising facts for me was that the visitors from the Republic of Ireland were up 46%. I mean, that's huge from last year. So maybe a question to yourself, Mandy. In terms of those visitors, it surprised me the number of visitors. Do you see that in your own hotel, which is the best hotel in Northern Ireland?
Thanks very much. All message.
Did you see an increase in particularly visitors from the Republic of Ireland? And the big question, and nobody seems to give me an answer to this, why is there such a big increase from the Republic of Ireland? Nobody seems to.
Well, there's definitely good numbers from in our business from the Republic of Ireland, but on top of that, we have had a huge increase we've had people from Israel, we've had people from Brazil, Korea, China, numerous tours in the last 3 months. So the international visitor has increased as well. Our problem is the balance. You know, we've got a lot of the pure tourists coming in, which are mostly coming through escorted tours, which wouldn't be as lucrative as the corporate market. Our balance, where we would have the tourist section growing, the corporate has been static or decreasing in the last, since the start of the economic crisis. And we need to keep growing the visitor numbers through the holiday visitors, but we also need to try and bring on the corporates, because it's not balancing the books for us. And Patsy, you talked about corporation tax and foreign direct investment. We play an important role for Invest NI when they are bringing new business into Northern Ireland. Nobody's coming to Northern Ireland to come to a hotel. They're coming to see an attraction or take part in an event. We are the service of that. And people are going to relocate to Northern Ireland at some very well paid bits of employment. We have to service that. You know, the bars have to be good, the restaurants have to be good, the welcome has to be good, schools, and we've got all of that. You know, so we do play a very, very important role in that.
And again, just in terms of the, I know we're establishing a Northern Ireland office in Beijing at the moment, and that's the biggest potential for the future. I think we have something like 1,600 people at Titanic Belfast, July and August, including 200 from Hong Kong. So do you see that as an important strand then, Jonathan? And how do we tap into that? You know, there's millions more Chinese people touring all over the world.
They're very, very important. They're a different type of tourist. They all go for the Kodak moment. So if you talk to Tim in Visit Belfast or Titanic, you know, they are the quickest people that will go right through the exhibition because they just want the photograph opportunity and move on to the next. With any new emerging markets, you usually get the escorted tours and probably the cheaper end of the market, whereas that as they get more familiar with Northern Ireland and that grows, then you start to bring in the higher spenders. I would presume with that office opening, Tourism Ireland will up their activity in that region, and as well as the tour operators. We do have something in Northern Ireland every year where we would bring in maybe over 100 tour operators, and it's like speed dating, and we have the workshop, and we've all built up really good relationships with those people, some for maybe 25, 30 years, and that has had a real surge since we've had Titanic to 2012, because we now have a reason for mostly come through the south of Ireland, but they've now got a reason to stay in Northern Ireland for a night or 2 nights, whereas before they could have come, went up the Giant's Causeway and then went up into Donegal. We now have something that captures them, but it's also really, really important that we don't take our foot off the gas as far as Titanic is concerned. All that investment we need to keep behind that and keep the marketing campaign up. 2012 was just a fantastic year for everybody. Civic pride that it brought as well as the economic benefit was amazing.
Just one final question, Chair. Janice, you mentioned earlier on about the importance of events. I attended the Belfast Culture Night last Friday night. One of the most amazing nights I've ever experienced. Huge numbers of people, including families. I know Phil mentioned about Suffolk family. It was a family orientated, and we're looking at hundreds of free events. And hopefully next year our friend Gordon, he's our top man in DCOM, so he maybe attend the Culture Night.
What about Nelson?
No, we had one in Hollywood, which is far better.
But again, just one of those are sort of events which should be supported.
All events are important, and the hierarchy of events is something that you've got to put in place. You've got to have a world-class event, and you've got to have local events as well. You talked about, Chinese people coming here. For them, this is an event. Coming to Titanic. Titanic, they all know because of the movie, and that's the thing for them. And we quite often, events are quite a confused area, and that people sort of see, a really big event is the most important thing. It is important that you have, the world class, the British Open, but from that it is equally important that you have a schoolboy competition in Hollywood Golf Club. It's the two kind of it's the two kind of elements of it. Two of the things you mentioned are one of the big barriers to growth we have. Access is a big problem into Northern Ireland. You can effectively get from China to Dublin in probably 15 hours, hubbing through the Middle East. You also have an issue where we are not part of the Schengen visa. So most Chinese people who come here and most Asian people, they come, and I speak from experience, they go to every sort of world-class site in the world that you can think of. When they come to Europe, they go to the Berlin Wall, the next day they're at the Eiffel Tower, then they're into London, then they're in Titanic. And they'll do that in 5 days and get a photograph at each one and put it on their website and their Facebook site. And from our point of view, we've got to look at that bigger picture, but the barriers that we have are quite considerable. But the events, if you have an event on here, people will see it on Facebook. They will, they'll see it on social media, and the multiplier effect of that for us is fantastic. We can't buy that type of publicity. For 2012, the amount of publicity that we got, we simply couldn't buy. We have an actual graph in the office which we refer to as the swimming pool graph, and it's a big blue sea of where Northern Ireland was for a period of 38 months, just going along. The day Titanic opened, it was basically as if somebody just stepped off a diving board, and the figures just went up and up and up. And it has been a marvellous multiplier for the whole of Northern Ireland, not just for one particular place. And we always make the point that in this region, we're very good at building things. We're particularly good at it. We build it, and then we think, that's that built, tick. We never actually think of, well, we've built Titanic, what are we going to do around that area? How are we going to promote it? And how are we going to keep it fresh in the tourist mind? You're competing against things like Disneyland. Disneyland spend $5 billion on rides, and that's a small ride. And every year they have the new Harry Potter ride or Game of Thrones, whatever it is. And that's what you're competing against. So we build it, and then we don't market it. And that really is, and people often see that marketing as the enjoyment police have a considerable problem with it, because they think if you're spending money on marketing things or getting people to employ things, it's not tangible. But our industry is involved in, you know, delivering experiences and dreams, and sometimes you can't measure that. But if we don't promote it, we're not going to have people at it.
I mean, just to say that Titanic Belfast has a refreshment fund, and one of the ideas looking at the moment is an outdoor beach, the first Northern Ireland outside of Bangor. So,
Is the beach from Bangor been moved to Titanic?
Okay, thank you.
Captain Story.
Ms. Fearon, Megan.
Thank you for your presentation. It almost made hotel work sound glamorous. I worked in one for 6 years. I can confirm it is definitely not.
Now look where you are.
My questions will be around the results that in your document around the 5 T's, I suppose. And it says here double GDP. How did you come to that? Or?
It's actually how you actually work out. We've taken what we currently produce and the level of business that we give, and as things go up, what we actually would add on to that. So your whole GDP figure would actually grow. You would actually, as well as adding on the stuff from the hotel industry, the amount of jobs you produce, we currently sit, I think it is 0.5 of a job for every 2 jobs. You'd be up to nearly a 1 for 1. So the actual amount of wealth that you're bringing actually more or less doubles.
Okay, but there's no specific figures. It's just I know we don't actually have a measure of GDP for the.
No, you've GVA.
Yeah.
But we actually had an economic
I
figure.
see it's 860 million.
Yeah, we actually got it done by Oxford Economics,
Okay.
who have a tourism index, and they actually look at the multiplier effect of that, and they actually apply a GDP model to the whole of world. They have a world GDP figure, and they actually apply it accordingly and work it out from there. Okay. So they actually do use a GDP model. We use a GVA model, but their GDP model is adjusted for tourism, both north, south, and in the UK.
And in terms of the differential in VAT rates between north and south, obviously I'm from Newry and Armagh, South Armagh in particular. Do you think that has an effect on hotels and tourism in the border areas? Or
5 counties.
Specifically?
5 counties touch on the border. So if I'm a bride and I'm in Newry and I'm looking to go to the Canal Court, and Cabra Castle is X amount cheaper and is trading at with rooms and food at 11% cheaper, that's a big argument. So you don't have to be. You know, I am from Derry, and let me tell you, the women of Derry are very, very astute when it comes to A, finding husbands, and B, planning weddings. And they will go across the border, and there is actually no secret to that. Our number of domestic tourists fell here last year as the euro got weaker, and also as some of the Island of Ireland projects became actually more cost effective and a cheaper option.
The south in particular for events and weddings and conferences is a lot more popular, right? The hotel I worked in is actually just across the border, so wrong side of the border for Gordon.
You're away with it.
The Carrickdale is a very good example. The Carrickdale is a very good example of a multifunctional hotel that runs on driving numbers through it, and does trade well because of its border location. It's automatically, before they do anything else, it is automatically 11% cheaper.
Do you have any studies on in particular figures for the difference, just for border areas in particular?
No, we just did it for all of Northern Ireland, but it really is everywhere, because it's such a. I mean, Belfast effectively competes with Dublin for many things, so you're taking it on that basis. And if you're in, Newry, you're competing with Dundalk. If you're in, Enniskillen, you're probably competing with, Cavan, Monaghan, or Cavan, sort of those areas, Donegal. So there is actually a direct touch. It is that touch. It is that discretional spend. Weddings are worth a lot of money, and if you can attract somebody, and everybody has nice locations and lovely rooms. So sometimes it is that, you know, additional cost thing that can actually send people slightly the other way.
And in terms of the whole of the north, I'm presuming you have researched the ranking by the most popular destination or the busiest.
The most popular attraction in Northern Ireland is
Yeah.
Titanic. Belfast has the most hotel rooms, so therefore by the multiplier, with almost 4,000 hotel bedrooms, and I think Belfast occupancy last year was about 75%, so they would attract the most number of rooms. But you have other destinations that are, I mean, the Canal Court would have a very high occupancy and quite a high figure, so it's not a simple measure of comparison. A very good example would actually be Fermanagh, where you've about 800 hotel bedrooms, but you've a vast other stock of accommodation product in self-catering. So you would actually be comparing it as an overall. As an industry, hospitality and tourism is, you know, very strong in all destinations and could be stronger and has something to offer. Actually has something to offer every town and village in Northern Ireland. It's not a one centric product.
Yeah.
It can be spread, you know. In many ways, I suppose Newry is a pretty good example because people will come to Newry to shop and do other things.
Yeah.
The secret is to either get them to stay overnight. The definition of a tourist being somebody who moves out of their natural environment for more than 12 hours. The secret for us is to get people to stay here for longer than 12 hours. Preferably overnight in a hotel.
No, it's just, well, I'm from South Armagh, but the Ring of Gullion is a tourist product that we're really trying to get together at the minute and sell, but we would have a problem with the lack of hotels in that area, kind of. The Canal Court would be probably the main.
If you take that, you have a minimum of 8,000 hotel bedrooms that are less than an hour from the Sleeve of Gullion.
No.
So you have a minimum of that. And we traditionally, until about 4 years ago, the route for the bulk of tourists into this island was Dublin, turn up the road, go to the Giant's Causeway and go to Donegal. That was the route that they went. They now have to stop somewhere. They have to stay somewhere in the north. They don't have a choice because you can't do Titanic and even if you are Chinese and you run around and get 5 million photographs, you actually physically can't do it. So the secret really for a product like Sleeve Gullion is to actually get it added on as, first of all, an add-on, and then eventually get it turned into a stop. Armagh is another very good example. Armagh is a very good heritage product, a very good Christian heritage product. And the secret is to get those things added on because eventually people will sometimes move away from the main route and will look for something different. But there are a minimum of 7,000 hotel bedrooms within an hour of Sleeve Gullion.
Okay, thanks, Megan.
Where do you want?
Mr. Frew, Paul.
Yes, thank you. Can I just say, I don't want to turn this negative. I wouldn't dream of it. I'm a very positive guy, and I appreciate the work that the hotels have done of late, and in particular what you had to go through, I suppose, through the troubles when you were. Some hotels was actually a target for terrorism. So I know you have come through, but I have this. I have this issue, and you alluded to it with regards to the split or everybody trying to do their own wee thing. When you look at the global scale of where we need to be, we really need to be targeting one thing and then adding everything in as if it's beside it. So we've got Belfast with Titanic and then beside it the Giant's Causeway or something of that nature to attract people. But whilst there's a challenge to get people here, and I know with the access problems and everything else, but you look at the American tourism market and the Gulf will always centre big there, and then you have the snap tourism from the Asian markets. My problem is, and my concern is that when we get them here, do they get a good feel and do they get a good experience that they will come back or will tell their friends to go or bring their families here? And I think that my concerns are centred around our hospitality. When you go to places like Las Vegas, I know it's a different scale, but when you go to Las Vegas, the hospitality and the niceness of the service you get is nearly describe it as overwhelming or even aggressively nice. You don't get that same experience here, and in some cases and in some places, not necessarily hotels, but even restaurants, it can be patchy. Is that something that you're aware of, you're conscious of, and is there a plan or strategy to actually fix that?
The patchiness of it is basically around the fact that it is, it's part of you are engaging with people. I would say in the Vegas model they're relying on 25% of their salaries coming from being nice, so that certainly would be a strong motivator. I think it's again boils back down to this training issue. It's who you get into your industry, what they're in it for, and where they have to go. Certainly when people leave here, their opinion of here would be that they have had a good experience. There is this idea that it is patchy, and I would say that service throughout the world can be patchy, and there's no point in us being defensive and saying that it isn't, because it can be. You could walk in on a Monday morning and meet somebody and they could have had a really horrific day and it doesn't start well. We do look at, there's World Host, which is the sort of the training scheme that Dell runs to try and get people on to a similar level. But again, we would look at different markets require different things. If I'm coming in and I'm a business person, I don't really want somebody asking me, have I had a nice day? How was my journey? Where am I? I was once asked, would I like a goldfish in my bedroom? Would I like a goldfish in my bedroom? I don't want any of that.
We've been charged for it.
No, goldfish was to keep me company and I was allowed to name it, which is quite interesting. A new idea.
Did you name
him? I did name him. And
What was the name?
I gave him the name of Jason because when he arrived he was black. So I thought that was quite a good name for him. But, it is... tourism is about people interacting with people, as is hospitality, and unfortunately sometimes it does go wrong. We would like to see people look at different markets. This is what this boils down to. You can have... I wouldn't like us to have a bland, homogenous welcome. Every welcome you get here, it can be quite genuine. Sometimes it can be a little bit kind of grumpy and patchy, and we would like to see that change. But we've got to work out, where we are going to. Also, as an industry, this is a people industry, and you've got to kind of push that forward. Most people who go away from here go away and they say that they had a much better experience than they thought they were going to have. The food, they always say about food, that food was much, much better than they actually believed it was going to be, and that they felt very safe when they were here. But this is when they actually are here. The secret for us is, in general, Irish people, north or south, have the reputation of being very friendly, and that's something people are seen as our one biggest asset.
Okay, thank you.
Phil, you want to come in briefly?
I just want to talk about food. Michelin have produced their latest guide again today, and there's still no restaurant in the north that has a Michelin star. How big of a problem is that?
Michelin came out this morning, and I think Michelin work on two levels. There's Michelin Star, which is the expensive end of it, and there's Beeb Gourmand. I understand that there are about 5 Beeb restaurants in it this year from Northern Ireland.
There are 5, yeah.
And maybe that is a market that we are currently better suited to. A Michelin star we've had 3 restaurants here in the past that have had Michelin stars, the last one being Dean's, which made the decision to move away from that world. Michelin food is expensive. You need, in many ways, a large corporate market to service it, which we necessarily do not have, and cities that tend to have a large amount of Michelin restaurants and towns tend to be near large urban hubs. And an example being where the Fat Duck is in Bray, which has a huge, is in the south of England and can attract people. But I will say other regions, Glasgow doesn't have a Michelin star restaurant, Manchester doesn't have a Michelin star restaurant. It would be nice to have one because it's a good news story. The thing is, can it actually survive as a standalone? Certainly the fact that we've had a couple of Beeb Gourmands this year is good news, because maybe that sits better in the marketplace. And certainly I did speak to one of the Michelin inspectors last week, and they see Northern Ireland as being, I think they're nice, cost sensitive, and therefore maybe going out and spending £150 on your dinner on a Wednesday evening is not something that people here.
You want to get some portion of champ with that?
I'd be probably looking for a potato field, Phil, but anyhow, that's where we are.
Okay, thanks.
That was briefly. That was good to cover that. And then, Mr. Anderson, Sydney, if you.
I will read it. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, ladies, for your presentation. I just would probably like to say that
Northern Ireland's bigger than just starting in Belfast or Hollywood or Bangor, and as we're getting here this morning. But we have touched on the like of getting out and about throughout Northern Ireland. You touched on the Christian heritage and the like of Armagh, different places. But did I pick you up? You said there's 17% or something of hotels in one street in Belfast. And how many hotels have we?
You have 130.
Well, that's about, my figures, I was just doing a quick figure, 20 odd hotels.
It's not 20, the biggest hotels are there.
Right, okay.
You have, if you start at the top, if you start at the Wellington Park and you go down the street and you end up at Castle Street at the back of Castle Court, you have 3 hotels there that have more than 200 bedrooms. So you have a considerable amount of hotel stock
It's
in
all
one
condensed,
street.
a lot of condensed in that.
It is condensed, but it's condensed for that market.
Yeah.
People who necessarily go to the country or go for a rural experience may not necessarily want a large hotel.
Yeah, well, that's the point I'm coming to, Janice, is how do we maybe work on those hotels to maybe promote and market to get them out into the rural hotels, to get them, or they just want to come to Belfast and more or less that's as far as they go?
We've had a big segmentation process here, which is looking at the different areas that attract different peoples. Certainly a lot of continental visitors, particularly the Germans, and just make sure I get this right word, are interested in the emptiness of Northern Ireland, and I don't mean that, and they're interested in wide rural spaces, they're interested in standing in the middle of the moorns and looking and seeing, you know, nothing but the natural environment. That's not to say that there's nothing there. That's the market that they want. That's what they're actually after. And they prefer smaller hotels, not necessarily at the higher star rating, but that's actually what a lot of those people are actually after. This is the layers of what we actually want. And for those properties, there are platforms that are available to them that they can go out and promote. It's just getting the number of people there. A large amount of them rely on maybe tourists that come from closer to home, which is the domestic market and to a degree the market from the Republic of Ireland, and that's been a traditional thing. But there is room for there's room for every type of hotel. You know, some people want to come and they want their budget hotel where they go in, they come, they stay, it's a bed for the night, they're going to something, and you would be surprised to that might be very attractive to a business person at a very senior level, because their budget constraints, whatever, it may be attracted to a younger person or somebody who just simply wants to use it. Other people who are maybe going out into the country to relax prefer something that is slightly different. But there is room for every hotel. The fact that a lot of your hotels are in Vegas there are probably 25,000 hotel bedrooms in the one street. In one street in Manhattan there are probably 10,000. So it is sometimes a concentration of one type of product in an area is good for the rest of business, because people will disperse to look for something different.
Just quickly, in relation to, I think, Mandy, maybe you touched on with the district councils and maybe strategies there, maybe hopefully we'd want them to work up in trying to get a tourism strategy right across Northern Ireland. That work along with the Northern Ireland Tourist Board and such like, and yourselves. How do you see that going forward? Is there?
We would like to see that maybe as an overarching strategy that people bought into. Otherwise, we could end up with 11 strategies. Plus, we could probably end up with 25 strategies of an afternoon. Yeah. And unless we have one overarching aim that is cross-departmental, that everybody is working towards, this is really about bringing more tourists here. That is simply what this is about. I think our last strategy said we were to have 4.5 million tourists with a turnover of £1 billion. Last year, tourism brought in £723 million to this region. So that leaves you with just under 300 million to turnover, by my estimation. And if logic is to be applied to this, that leaves you 300,000 people spending roughly £1 million each on their trip here, which is not going to happen. So you've got to look at the type of tourist you're getting, what they're going to do, and where they want to go. It's not where we want to send them, it's where they want to go. And we've got to take the things that we have that are the jewels in our crown, be that the beaches, the coastline, Titanic, open field, Slieve Gullion, whatever it is, and we've got to map that on to. The big fear is that everybody will want to have a massive attraction, which could be a £1 million attraction. A £1 million attraction will not cut through on the international market. It just simply will not cut through. It will not get the traction for you to bring people from overseas to here. And our worry is that we need to have something, you need to have something that shows where we are in 2030, and you need to have a medium-term strategy to get you to there by 2020. And our worry is that working strategies up from a local level up, as opposed to an overarching strategy down, will present a really, really difficult time for everybody.
There's a great amount of work here for
Yes.
like the
Yes.
new councils and all to get
Yes.
involved. And
Yeah.
sure, everyone will want their own slice of the cake here to maybe put out, as you say.
Our worry is that the cake is going to stay the same size
Yeah,
or shrink,
yeah.
and that the slices of cake are going to become with uneven amounts of jam, and therefore there will be nobody will be happy. And the secret of all of this is to grow the cake. The secret of this is to get more tourists to spend more money and actually look at the type of, as Mandy says, look at the type of tourist you are getting. A tourist from North America spends over £300. Now, there's a big difference in the spend model, and there's a big difference in the business tourist, I think, spends £161. The leisure tourist spends £50. So for every one business tourist you have 3 leisure tourists. So if you can actually, rebalance things, our concern is that small stratagem running in some ways in a contrary direction to an overall strategy will be a very, very big issue.
We also have a problem with our holiday visitors spend less per capita here than they do in Wales and England and Scotland. So we have to be able to give them more opportunities to take their money out of their pocket and put it into Northern Ireland PLC.
And look for a lot of goldfish.
A lot of goldfish.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. One very, very brief question, and I'll not delay any further, and that is corporation tax, the reduction in the rate of corporation tax. Would that have a direct impact upon the actual industry that you represent yourselves in terms of the amounts that any, or if there are any of them, pay corporation tax? And then, now, this is just looking for a brief answer, more or less yes or no, and then the implications further down the line.
The simple answer is that the paying of corporation tax and the reduction of it will have a limited effect on hotels.
Right.
The reduction of it on a wider scale for the attraction of new business and bringing corporate companies here would have great benefit.
Okay, good. That's great. Well, that's been very informative for us as members, and I'm glad there was good dialogue there. And needless to say, some of the issues that you have raised will be fed into any other talks process that will take place elsewhere on the back of the Scottish devolution referendum and issues that are raised from that too. So thanks very much indeed for your time. And
Thanks for the
good to see both of you again.
Okay, thanks very much.
We'll move, ladies and gentlemen, very quickly to the next briefing, which is the oral briefing from the Ulster Farmers Union on the electricity policy review, and papers for this are included at page number 50. And at that is the clerk's brief, which is at page 51. And correspondence from the UFU, which is page 52. And the here, Is the here okay?
Certainly was people outside the door.
They're there whenever. All right.
Apologies for being late, Chair. I have to go to that other function. I had cancelled there at the last.
So, with us here today, briefing the committee from the UFU are Mr. Barclay Bell, Deputy President, Mr. Gary Hawkes, Chairman, and Mr. Chris Osborne, Senior Policy Officer. You're all very welcome indeed. Good to see you again. So thanks very much for attending. Now, if you could give us we already have the papers in front of us here, so it'll be a bit of a dialogue between ourselves. We seek to explore the issues and what it actually means. So, but if you want to give us a brief overview, I don't know is it yourself, Barclays?
No, I think Gary's going to lead here.
All right. Right. If you want, please, then, Gary, to give us a brief overview, then we'll have question and answers from members. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We're basically here today to talk about microgrid and the situation and the benefits for Northern Ireland, where we are with the difficulties that you're aware of we have been facing here in the agriculture sector. And we're looking here at moving forward and improving the difficulties that people have with conditional offers. Have been spent a large amount of money over the last number of years, been encouraged to take part in the renewables developments in Northern Ireland. And at today's figures, we estimate that the rural and agriculture sector has spent up to £20 million, planning fees, consultancies, wildlife requirements, surveys, and now face a situation where they're getting astronomical offers from Northern Ireland Electricity to get a grid connection due to congestion on the lines. And the situation is that most of the people are encouraged to go for a certain size of development. They were all advised, because everybody who was involved in this had any knowledge. This is all professional advice from leading authorities who just told us this is the route to take. When most people done that, they found out it was incorrect. It was not the route to take. But we have been left now holding the child now, and a real difficult situation. We're trying to relieve this for our members, and we're looking at alternatives. The microgrid is one we see which is a great opportunity within the agriculture sector for the shifting of load, the creating of a mixed input, and trying to encourage and negotiate with NI to put in a managed grid system, where they actually manage on the 11 kVA, which all the rural sector is. It's an unmanaged system, and if you put in an offer for a 250 kilowatt turbine, NI make you an offer for that size, but you don't actually use that. Basically, a requirement only for a very little time of the year. It can be as low as 6%. So you're actually looking for and paying for something that you can't actually manage, but they perceive that you may achieve it at one time of the year, and you have to have that capacity available to you. But our view is that on a more managed system, and a lesser cost of a grid connection, and a smart monitoring system where loads can be monitored and diversed among other producers to manage the load, that we see quite a future in this. The agriculture sector also faces quite a rigorous demand to reduce its carbon footprint. And the sector's working, as I'm sure your members are aware, was AD in the Northern Ireland, quite a bit of development going on, quite a few in the planning process, but again, not being able to get anywhere forward on this. These things are very important, not only as energy production, but their environmental benefits, and the reductions of methane, nitrous oxides, and other carbon things that are affecting the environment. So it's not really an energy debate we're here today, it's also a joint thing and being involved in our commitment to the environment.
Okay, right. Thanks very much. And I heard a number of the issues that you raised there about money's been spent on farmers, by farmers, on such as planning consultancy and other consultancy. In some cases, is it the case that some people who were touting for trade called with farmers and advised them to do this, that and the other whenever possibly wind speeds mightn't have been appropriate? I remember one man came to me and his issue was that somebody had advised him rather improperly that he should have stuck a turbine in a bit of a hollow, which really wasn't the place where it was going to work. So there are clear issues about the levels and quality of advice, because possibly some of these less than scrupulous consultants, all they're thinking about is the coupons in their back pocket for themselves, rather than longer term what it might be to the benefit of the farmers. So clearly there are issues there. Have your members come to you and have they complained about the adequacy of the improper advice that they've been given in some cases?
Well, the situation I mentioned in my earlier address was that a number of years ago, going back 4 to 5 years, where the farmers were invited along to consultancy shows and events in Northern Ireland, widely advertised to come along and take part in this, and they were advised by the organisations and the government representations and stands that are there that this is the route to take, and these are the people to consult, and this is how to manage your project. And this we knew was the best advice available. But a lot of it was architects and consultancies that just looking at where the possibilities of a development could take place, not really the reality in the financial situation. Our view is the situation at the moment financially for the rural economy, that if only 60% of what's in the pipeline was to achieve a benefit due to a better type of support network system, it's got a potential income between 45 and 60 million a year to Northern Ireland economy, which is not a one-off figure, because this is underwritten by the government for 20 years to the ROC system, or the tariffs if you can avail of them at present. So it has got a calculated figure of 1.2 billion. That is quite a substantial amount of money for the rural sustainability of the economy, which is underwritten by Ofgem. So they're being offered this opportunity, but they can't ascertain of it. It's a very frustrating situation for people where they can meet all the requirements and all the legislation and the wildlife and the planning to come along to a party or business plan where you can go no further and having, as I said, negative effect on the economy.
I'll not even go the route of asking about ADs and how they're affecting Conacher. I'll not even go there, because that's another thing. But in terms of the quality of advice, I know for a fact that some people have been given poor advice from word go. Now, that's not because they've been encouraged by government to go to a particular consultant or another. It's just there have been people going around various farmers and saying to them, you'll gain X, Y, and Z, when in fact they were sold a pup. And that's the reality. I don't think there's anything we as elected representatives could do about that. That's just down to bad, ill-informed advice. People are being given that sort of advice on occasions about planning dwellings on farms, and I deal with quite a bit of that too. So I think maybe there's an issue, a note of caution should be given there to the farming community about the level and the quality of advice that they are being given on some occasions, because sometimes people are just been misled.
Well, previous to the situation, the Farmers Union didn't have an organisation within them, within the union to actually deal with. There's a new remit, it's rural enterprise. It's a newer thing, renewable energy. So the unions decided then to take this mantle on, and since that we have been to our group office advising people to be wary and careful, and study where they're going now, which has changed the situation where we're at the moment, and consult. People that know how.
I still, sorry Chairman, just to say, I still receive probably 3-4 telephone calls probably a fortnight from farmers who've been approached by third-party companies wanting to lease a part of their land to erect a wind turbine. And the advice that we always give is, run this contract past your solicitor, but first and foremost, there is a certain amount of land grabbing go on. There's a lease part of the contract where there's no obligation for the power company on inverted commas to basically see the contract through to fruition. So this is actually creating some of the problems that we're seeing within the grid, whereas these grid applications actually go in, but they're never actually
never going
finished.
To see the light of day, no. So can we maybe just move then to, you highlighted an issue, and I'm very interested in finding out how this works. The microgrids themselves then, how are they managed, or how do they operate? Can you maybe just explain to me a wee bit more detail, because we've got the briefing notes here on paper, but and probably whenever the Kale one's up and running, it might be an idea for us to go in and have a look at it and see how it works.
Well, basically, Chris will update you on some ones that are taking place, but basically what we'd like to see happening is NA would give you, if they take a line, a district line, and the 4 turbines say has got approved for that, and then 4 turbines add to 1 megawatt on theory, on paper. What happens then is NA say, right, that line's overloaded, and it's just a theory paper, but as I was saying, it only reaches that potential 6% of the year. We want it managed, that they're actually looking theoretically at what's happening on a day-to-day basis or an hourly basis on that line to achieve more load and more freedom on capacity. Up to now, NIE did not do that. They just give you a black and white, what you put in your quotation for. But now we're looking at a situation where we're looking for managed, and they're offering through a Project 40, which you may have some details on, where curtailment may come into place. If there's too much capacity, could be cut back. But that's a better situation possibly than not being able at the early stage to get your business on go.
Sort of ways to tease that out, usually NIE don't really do anything sort of ways for the value of it. What's in it for them? Well, take over management of it.
There's quite a bit in it for them. There's voltage control. NIE have a big issue about voltage and spiking and additional loads of uncertainty, where a managed grid can control that, and you can control your suppliers, and you can control the loads on it, and that's what a managed grid is. It's something we don't have in Northern Ireland, and it's not really in the UK much either, but it's a future. It's a future way forward to incorporate an awful lot more small-scale energy on the 11 kVA system, not the 33 where the bigger farms are, but on the 11 local. It creates local security of energy distribution within a district and area, and you have less weaknesses and better quality.
Can I add, Chairman, probably what as well that NIE would be able to get out of this as well is what they call cost avoidance. Because at the moment NIE are facing significant bills to upgrade certain certain substations within the country. A microgrid would take that, would avoid those particular costs. So whenever they go to the utility regulator for RP6, which is coming up shortly, for example, that would be probably significantly reduced if there was a microgrid system in place. And he said as well about how the microgrid would work. I think if you actually wanted to look at it, you should actually Google Fort Bragg in North Carolina, because there's an army base there, which is 100 square miles, is actually run as a microgrid.
Right.
And if you want a little bit more detail about, don't we give you a bit more detail about how we'd envisage Cal would work?
I would think yes, and ultimately we'll go and visit the place, because we could probably theorise about it all day and still not get right what it means, you know. Well then, what about we'll have to ask here about Sony. What input do they have in terms of fluctuations, or say the microgrid's not generating enough power, or has to be reduced or fluctuated up or down? What input would they have to this?
Well, Sony's situation is where they complain about the smaller scale is not able to recognise it. They don't presently can monitor what the production. They can monitor the bigger one farms and the bigger connection.
Yes.
But what's been proposed at the moment, that SCADA control will be in every situation at a cost, of course, to people. But if it can, manage the connection, is something we can accept, and that means that they will have a focus. And instead of having, there'll be facilities on your site that they can control and curtail your output. But there'll also be, what they don't have at the moment, is controls at the substations locally.
Yes.
That they can see what the heat is their big concern. And for Sony is recognising if there's a power failure somewhere else in the network, that they can switch off all, that there's not a link up where they can manage and disconnect that sector and leave the whole sector on. Before, in Northern Ireland, I'm sure you're aware, when the electric goes out, it can go out for a whole quarter of the country. Because that's how it's divided at the moment. You can have the whole northwest or the southeast of, but on a managed system that wouldn't happen. It can be very located.
What they call islanded?
Islanded, right.
Island, where there is still a supply available to meet a certain demand, but they can sit and function and say, well, this demand can go that far. You're going to limit your consumers' downtime.
It's worth adding, Chairman, that the microgrid would work in conjunction with NIE as the DNO and also with Sony, because the idea is that Gary just mentioned would be the islanding situation. Again, in the US, the enthusiasm has been generated by, amongst others, Hurricane Sandy, whereby there were parts of the US substations that they knew would go down.
Yes.
The microgrid would basically be able to work in with the other system and bring in load or whatever else it might be.
Okay. Right, thank you for that. Mr. Agnew, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this to us today, because it's certainly a very interesting concept, the microgrid. I'm just wondering what stage is it at? Is it the idea stage, or where are you in negotiations, for example, with NIE, or how far along are we?
Yeah, well, the situation was we were very frustrated for quite a while there, early this year, not going anywhere with this project, with this development. We're just sitting on conditional offers, moving nowhere at all. People, conditionality was you got a big quote plus conditional costs additional to, and it was unviable. So we had to sort of encourage NIE to look at other alternatives, and one was it's only in operation since about midsummer, is Project 40, where they will allow connections to the standard grid at the moment without limited connection and more managed. The problem is NIE is quite a large, cumbersome organisation, and a lot of legislation, a lot of requirement, and a lot of what NIE's view is they'll work into their licence conditions. And as long as they meet their licensing conditions with NIE, they will not alter from that. Very difficult to alter. Stepping into a new development or a new way of working is they're only there to keep the lights on and keep the grid safe and manage it in accordance with the requirements of the consumer. But to move on to another development and another phase, it's difficult to turn that ship around and to get them to emphasise on how we modernise. And if we're coming from a farming background, trying to tell NIE to modernise their grid, you understand where we're coming from there, you know what I mean? Company culture come up telling us how to run our system, but
I don't think you'd lost at the same time.
Sorry?
You thought you'd lost at the same time.
Stephen, sort of to further on from what Gary was saying in terms of actual movement, we'll go back to Lacal again, because that was probably the most high profile. We'll have this conglomeration of farmers have come together, and B9 are actually working with it as well, David Surplus, and that's to integrate a storage system. And David Surplus has been in contact with the architects within NIE, because nothing can happen until the architects are going, and I'm due to brief Michael Atkinson, in charge of connections, on how we see microgrids working in Northern Ireland. To answer your question there.
And I suppose I'm just trying to get a sense of how likely this is to happen. It's certainly a very interesting idea at this stage. Is this something that feels like it's going to happen? Is it a possibility? Is it a probability?
With regards to the specific location in Downpatrick, it is going to happen.
It is.
There's no ifs and buts about it. It's definitely going to go happen. Now, we are experiencing problems on the ground in terms of actual contacting some of the farmers who are going to be involved, but that's nothing to do with legislation. That's just down to farmer practice, and as we know, obviously never available whenever due to other obligations. But we're working with an independent consultancy on that in terms of getting farmer buy-in, because that is crucial.
What kind of scale would the Lacal project be? I mean, what sort of generation would you envisage in the area?
The envisage is going to be able to run probably a small village, plus there's going to be a business park, which is going to be used, as I think the Chairman actually mentioned about how it's going to be managed. It's going to be managed from within Ballyhorn Business Park down there. And it's actually not Ballyhorn, it's where Bishop's Court Air Base was. Also as well, in terms of actual generation capacity, there's going to be 5 250 kilowatt wind turbines, 2 500 megawatt AD units, plus quite a lot of solar PV, and also as well it's going to be linking in with the CGEM project in Portaferry.
Okay, that's excellent. In the presentation or the brief we were provided, sort of scale of jobs was referenced. Can you give a bit more detail around what you would envisage in terms of job creation?
Job creation, it will come from the business park, and also I would rather it was David Surplus sitting here answering that question, but the envisage is it would be at least 2 dozen jobs in the community, which is a start, which will be expanded upon, because it's job creation.
I think that's the very important thing about the whole project, that it is very much a community project, and it's not just farmers benefiting here, it's local businesses, local community groups. I mean, the whole community will feel a benefit from this one.
I know there's quite an active Locale conservation group. Are you working with them or trying to bring them along at this point? I know they're quite a suspicious bunch, I think would be fair to say.
Well, Stephen, this idea that UFU support is a community solution, and that Locale Environmental Group would be a part of that because it's a part of basically a community solution, and their buy-in it will be crucial. I think another thing as well is just to sort of stress, Gary mentioned Project 40. Project 40 is not going to be the solution to all farmers, to all people wanting to connect to the grid. NIE have identified a number of substations in Northern Ireland where it's going to cost millions to upgrade. That's where we feel that this would be a possible solution to work side by side with Project 40, in that where the substation is absolutely full to capacity and never be upgraded, we feel that this would work side by side with NIE's Project 40.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Mr. Dunn, Gordon?
Thanks very much. Yeah, just we appreciate you coming in today and making your presentation. The committee has received evidence of changes in attitude towards small-scale wind and single wind turbines due to the visual and noise impact. How do farmers work alongside local residents and other farmers perhaps who have concerns about developments?
Well, the situation we have got two situations in Northern Ireland. We have got the small scale, where it's mostly the community, or community involvement and farmers' involvement. And how you bring in community involvement is that the majority of these people who are building these turbines, they're consulting the local people. It's well enough debated locally that this is developments going on. And my discussions with people on that, and my encouragement is that they contribute, if they are successful in their development, that they contribute something to their townland or district in that area, the people who are on that ring sort of fence, because they've all got established community setups, so they're quite willing. Everybody's very interested in that, and the farmers development keen to encourage people and supply some funding to little projects, so that involves the community. You've got the larger organisations then, which is SEE and companies which are putting up them huge facilities and seeing for miles about. You know, so one has got a big impact and one's got a very lesser impact.
Okay, and what advice do you give to farmers on consultation with their neighbours?
I think there is no finite actual sort of advice you can give, because whenever one farmer's dealing with another, they're often related to each other in terms of just neighbour location, and it can be falling out not as a result of the turbine but down to other reasons. So
it could be history.
It could be history, which sort of takes away from the sort of reason why we're sitting here today. I think as well, one of the things that would sort of change relations a little bit in terms of microgrid would be if you had a number of turbines and those turbines were going to reduce energy bills. That could change the arguments quite a lot, because if somebody thought they're going to get a reduced bill, it might make them a little bit friendlier with the people who's putting up a smaller wind turbine, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think you're North Down, if I'm correct in saying. I noticed there at the top of Ballymuscaw there's a small scale wind turbine that's been erected. That's very interesting, because that turbine would be capable of producing an awful lot of energy, and I'd like to know how many objections there were to that compared to a 250 kilowatt one. So what I'm saying is the microgrid will probably result in those higher turbines getting smaller.
Yeah.
Probably be less.
Okay. Just generally, well, we encourage it, and he wants to know how I let it go. Generally, just on NIE, we've had a lot of Chairman, I hope I'm not encroaching on other people's points, but about the lack of resources really from NIE to manage the renewable sector and to engage and all the rest of it. You know, is that a major problem? Have they not put the resources, the people on the ground to do the work? Is this what you're finding? And as a result, response times are basically too slow.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that point of view. Up to now, and I mean this year, midsummer, NIE had a certain amount of staff and people involved in that, dealing with ever and ever more demand, and actually being overcome by what the amount of work they had to do and not really being able to deal with. So of lately they have increased the staffage quite a bit, they've increased the quality, and they have, even now as the very latest, if you look into their new website, which we encourage them and trying, you see, we work with them as explain to them how the people on the ground, rather than ringing them up all the time and looking at the answer, they can look in and see where they are and what's feasible in that area. I've designed a new website, and the issue on the funding.
This heat map, is it available?
Yes, that's.
Can I just add there? I've been dealing with NIE yesterday on this, and the new heat map's going to be launched next week. This is going to be a lot more interactive, whereby it was launched at the end of last year, and within it being published by a week, it was actually out of date because the red areas. The amber areas turn red very, very quickly. But now, if you put in, say, for example, a postcode, say, put in Summer Cumber, blah, 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 you can focus in and you can see the 33 kV, you can see the 11 kV, and it's a more detailed, itemised heat map. And just to sort of follow on from Gary was saying, by us engaging with NIA, we've improved the customer relations with landowners, and landowners have actually approached us over the last couple of months to say things have improved on the ground. And there's now a call centre set up dealing with specific queries, and it's actually working at the moment.
Good. No, thanks, Part of it was we had quite a heavy meeting with the utility regulator here. It was some months ago now. Time flies, and I've had a meeting with her myself recently. In fact, this week. So she believes that they've put quite a bit of pressure on NIA to make improvements. So I'm glad things are starting to improve, but obviously there's quite a long way yet to go. But it is a major challenge, really, is NIE. We feel NIE are like a civil service type mentality. An organisation has staff in place and slow to move and slow to change and have not really stepped up to the mark. But we're glad that there's some movement on it. Thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Right, Gordon. Mr. Frew.
Yes, thank you, and thank you very much for your information, gentlemen, at this point. A couple of things I want to talk about as quickly as I can. One is the managed connections. How does that sit with you as an organisation, the Project 40, and the fact that we could be limiting some of our businesses with regards to what they produce, and I suppose then what they profit out of it? What's the Ulster Farmers Union stance on that? I can understand why it would be done, and I can understand that it will actually move things forward progressively, but ultimately I think we will have to put more infrastructure into our infrastructure. And I know of a couple of substations, as you've already said, some of my own constituency of Kells, that people are telling us that it's nearly maxed out. Now, how could we allow that to continue? And whilst we should look at other avenues and things to be done, ultimately things will have to be improved upon and enhanced. So how do you see it as a long-term strategy?
Well, just briefly, at the present, the way I look at it, it's a tiered system. We have to do something immediately, something now that has to resolve some of the issues that we presently have in line, not the future ones. So this Project 40 will deal with the smaller scale, what we really deal with in the agriculture sector, what fits onto farms and solars and a small AD or whatever in the main situation. They may have to take less expectations than what their architects or consultants told them that they could. You're planning for, and go for what's realistically available that the grid can offer. And the managed system is that you'll have to manage your output and maximise it. The future is that if NIA give you 100 kilowatt of a grid connection, you're going to have to, as a promoter of that, manage it the best you can in a mix of energy output. You may have a turbine, but you also may need solar as well, because you need to be actually maximising that 100 kilowatt as much as possible. Because if we go back to what I mentioned earlier on, if you have 250 in a turbine, you only manage that, achieving that at 6% a year, so very efficient. A turbine's only 25% efficient and meeting that target of 6. So you need to get this target way up, and your income will increase actually on the smaller connection.
But is it not the case that you're basically putting a limiter on the amount that they can produce? Now, I can understand that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's been done. The rationale for that being done is so that you do not have to put in a bigger cable along the line. But if you can imagine that's okay for one farmer, but if you had 5 landowners, 10 landowners down at one strip in the same area, all going for a managed solution, you're still going to have the same problem in that you will still have to increase the infrastructure in the grid.
I interrupt, Paul. I think the most important point here is that the managed connection is going to change the way people actually look at small-scale renewables, because I put an article in the paper a couple of weeks ago saying it's a time for big isn't necessarily best. But what's going to happen with a managed connection is, say for example, you're wanting to put a 250 kilowatt wind turbine up, and it's going to cost you, let's make it more realistic, 150, and it's going to cost you £500,000, which is what we were hearing on the ground, that people were being quoted to connect. That £500,000 is going to become £50,000. So whenever you're doing your business plan, that's going to change how you look at the output. You're not going to be trying to get as much as possible. You're going to be able to make a living, make a decent return on a smaller turbine and a grid connection of £50,000.
But ultimately, is that not a false economy? Because ultimately you've reduced that man's potential to generate electricity, but you've also just kicked the can down the road with regards advancement in grid, which will have to ultimately happen anyway.
But the situation on that point is that NIE tell us that if we go down and insist on that system improvement, it'll take years, and we'll sit exactly as we are now and nothing will happen. So there is a phase, as I mentioned earlier on. The first phase is the Project 40, getting some relief and additionality onto the 11 QVA system, where it's a more managed control system, and their expectations that people at least get something moving forward. The next phase then is capital investment, moving the grid into the 21st century, 22nd century, moving it forward into a system that can cope with a lot more potential.
I can understand the logic behind it, but I still can't get my head. It's still a short-term fix. Yes. Would you agree?
Yes, we were quoted as saying as much in the press. Yeah. However, this brings in the microgrid as well.
Which is my next point. So how does it actually work? I can understand the concept of microgrid. I can understand what we're looking at, but how does it actually work practically on the ground, and how do you connect into the grid that is not of a grid? If you know what I mean? How will you be able to protect security of supply running in conjunction with the grid?
Well, basically, let me answer that. If you have a substation, you already have the infrastructure in place, and you're going to be running along what's already there. And if should anything go wrong, it's within one area. There's 210 substations in Northern Ireland. If you have one of those areas, it could be cut off automatically. Mm-hmm. However, should the other 209 go down, you'll still be running. Hence the increase in, I talked about security of supply. I don't know if you were here whenever I mentioned the US. The US had 55,000 substations. They actually worked out that it would take 9 of those to be identified by a terrorist, and the whole United States would go down. So basically, if you're basically working on a localised solution, it's more secure.
So it's a mini grid, microgrid grid within the main infrastructural grid.
Yes.
But how do you? I can understand it. You know, if you look at the most basic form of this, you have a renewable heat source which supplies heat to housing development. So it would be something of that nature, only of a grander scale, with more of a mix of generation, I would assume. But how do you actually put? How does the wires work? How do we get to those? How do we get to those generators? How do we get to those suppliers? How do we get to the businesses and the households? And then where do we connect into the main grid? And how do? And so you're talking about a source of power going one way and then a source of power going the other way.
Yes.
Is the grid able to cope with that intelligent design?
If I could just, on the back of that, presumably you've checked out the capacity of the substation, because one thing that has been coming back to us, particularly west of the Ban, is how much the substation is actually needed upgraded.
Yes.
So presumably your substation is at capacity enough to work with this.
That's why the cal was identified by B9 and the collection of farmers there.
Right, okay.
If you can identify demand in your area, up to now NI didn't consider a demand that you were close by that could mop up some of this. Because at the end of the day, they don't mind you connecting whatever it is, as long as you can identify demand or can use it. And the agriculture sector can be very adaptive and can use quite a bit of the energy within the sector. but then we have to meet the requirements, the legal requirements for meeting the grid, and we have to meet the requirements of Ofgem for the legal use of the energy.
But are you off the grid or on the grid? If you're off the grid, it's going to cost us all more, if you know what I mean.
The idea of the microgrid is basically that if you say, for example, the whole microgrid is producing more than the net level of electricity, that can go into the substation. NIE can avail of that as they see fit. That's what the substation allows NIE to do, is to say, take some of the energy or some of the electricity that's been produced out of the Cal substation and maybe bring it to Strangford or take it to Ballinhinch, wherever else it might be.
Yeah.
Gary just touched on a point which would sort of answer your original question, Paul, in relation to how is it going to work. You identify the demand. This is the whole point of what a microgrid does. Basically, at the moment, we have a supply-sided solution, whereas if you move to an individualistic approach, which is where you identify the demand that's going to be in the local area, which is easy to do, and that's what we're doing on the ground at the moment. We have looked at the village of Ardglass, we've looked at the fishing side of things as well, and we're bringing together how much electricity is needed, how much heat is needed. And you must remember as well, I haven't actually touched upon this, what is central to a microgrid to work is a storage solution.
Yeah.
And you will have the storage there that will also manage the heat, that will manage the electricity to be used during peak times, should the turbine not be turning for whatever reason.
Paul has raised a very important point there, and that is it, to all due intents and purposes, off or on the grid? Because obviously if it's off the grid, everybody else's costs start to go up to compensate for that, and that's one of the cases that has been made to it. So is it off or on? Maybe you want to check that one out and get back to us.
We're not the people who are actually, designing the Cal system.
Yes.
And the proposal. It's the concept. And the basic way that these things work, if they were to multiply out, it's like a circle. You draw a circle on the map.
I have the concept all right.
You draw the production in that area, but one will overlap the other one. The next circle will overlap it by 25% the next one, and they will interlink with each other.
But how do they interlink and how do they overlap? Because ultimately it's going to come down to a piece of cable going into a piece of plant that will flow electricity one way or the other.
Yes.
I understand the reason and the rationale for it. It's the same as the managed connections. To me, it's the future, there's no doubt about it, but it would have to be managed well, and we'd have to have a grown-up conversation about what we do with the existing infrastructure and where and when we upgrade it.
Absolutely.
Right, can I ask just, who do people pay their bills to?
And power and the money that goes to your bill, there's certain aspects that so much pence goes towards different allocations of it. NIE have a budget of around 100, 110 million where it looks after the management and improvement of the grid. But that's for maintenance and management and new lines where necessary. But that does not include any improvements or the requirements of this type of development. And NIE's attitude is additional funding will have to be found. The regulator says, board says, right, we can't take this from the consumer charges, so we have to find additional funding for this type of modernisation. They will allocate small amounts, but they will not take on, this second phase.
You see, this microgrid is similar to the ultimate problem that's facing a lot of farmers, whereby they want to produce energy just for their farm.
Yes.
They don't want to sell it to the grid, they just want to produce it to make their farm more efficient. So this is nearly like a grander scale where you have a community wanting to do that for themselves.
Just to get that, and maybe the concept hasn't been worked through in this level of detail, who people pay their bills to, I'm just not asking that for the fun of it, because we have had issues here. If you move off the grid, it's the rest of consumers who pick up a tab for that. And we've already had that through other bigger industries and firms in around Belfast here who are talking about moving off the grid, and as a consequence everybody else pays for the maintenance and upkeep of the networks. So has it been worked through to that stage? Who you pay your bills to? What are the implications for everybody else if people sort of set up their semi-power statelets as a result of this? Because clearly that has an impact as to what we're working through with its effect on other consumers, potentially, or not.
I think at the end of the day, so you touched on the issue to do with the community, and the community would own this grid.
Oh, sorry, I'm not just talking about the effect on the community.
Yes.
I'm talking about potentially if it moves off-grid or is seen to move off-grid, then other bills have to compensate for that happening. That's as it's been explained to us. The implications of all, say for example, some of the big businesses moving off-grid, then as a consequence of that, people have to pay for maintenance and upkeep of the electricity network. The less they're contributing to that, the more everybody else has to pick up. So it's an important point, this, because everybody else is saying then, well, that's grand maybe for the people of Lakeal, but what about the people of Belfast or the people of Cookstown or Mid-Ulster? What about them if their bills start to go up as a consequence?
The basis, in my view, and it's just not here yet, some of these things, solutions aren't here yet in totality, but the difficulty with the renewable energy sector supplying into the grid is consistency.
Yeah.
It's just the one big problem.
The wind farms. Wind anyway.
Wind anyway, 80 not so much, and solar variable too. So if you mix them up together a little bit and can integrate a storage system, which has been developed, there's energy type storage that you just don't take electricity here and you set it over there and say I'll take it out in a week's time. This is managed where the consumption it can increase for a few hours, or the production can increase for a few hours higher than the consumption. It can be stored retrospectively, and then as consumption was down or production was down, we can tailor it out. This is a very critical part of NIE's problem.
It's storage.
And this is more than managed to a grid, that you start to, instead of this going on here, production 10 o'clock from 8 to 10 up, and then calm weather at the moment, nothing happening. But we can manage it. There's ways of
storage is the key there.
Absolutely.
Because if you can't store, then it won't work.
Yeah.
Correct.
But that still doesn't resolve the issue about who actually owns that generated electricity.
That's right.
And who pays for it, and who do you pay to?
Well, I
and
think
how many meters do you have? Do you have 1 meter or 2 meters? Who owns the meters? These types of things.
Well, my understanding is that there would be no risk outside of the substation, and that would answer your question in terms of any bill payer, say for example in Ballynahinch having to put some money in towards Lacal. My understanding is it's going to stay within the Lacal area, as well ownership and management will stay within the Lacal area. And that means that I mentioned the business.
Who puts the grid up?
The grid's already there.
But if you're talking about NIE managing it, there'll have to be some bang for their buck on it. They just won't be doing that for the fun of it.
Yes, that level of details.
No, there's questions here, and maybe your consultants that you're dealing with will have to answer these questions for you, because I'm sure, while good for Lakeal, we're sort of always looking at the overall picture right across the north and the issues that it might potentially raise or not raise as a result. So who you pay your bill to? Meters, who owns the meters, who's the meters? Is there 1 meter, is there 2 meters? Are you off-grid, on-grid? And as a consequence of being off-grid, well then the ramifications potentially for every other consumer in the north picking up to compensate for that. Clearly those things would need to be worked through, and really as a consequence of what we're talking about here, there are a fair number of questions remain to be answered at that technical level.
And that is something, Chairman, that we intend to do with the utility regulator, because in terms of the licence, in terms of that type of thing, that's what we need to speak to her about.
One final question, because it's important to the query, and it was the point I alluded to with regards to the dual connections on farm. If you take it right down to the basic level of a farm, you want farmer Jim to put up a turbine, but he only wants it to help his brother house or his cattle shed. But he can't do that, because that means there's two connections, two supplies in it. You have the grid supply, ordinary NIE, and then you've got the wind farm or the wind turbine supply. They won't allow that at the present time. What's your views on that? Is there any exploratory work you've been doing with NIE on that to allow that to happen?
That's a very important point raised. It's something that I have an issue with NIE is that farmers in the agriculture sector, different farmers in different areas can do different things, and one maybe in a good area to produce energy, where we could have maybe not too far away, a kilometre away even, quite a large maybe chicken unit or pig unit or dairy unit or whatever, or processing facility. You could have a meal company, a supplier, big energy sources. Why can we not sell against our output as per metered to them customers? And NIE, as you say, take their management charges out of it.
I know what you're saying, but the question was more about the practicalities of you having basically two electricity supplies going into the one place, the NIE grid and then also the turbine cable. Yes. You're not allowed to do that at present. You're forced to sell your generation through the grid.
That is the problem. That is the problem for. If the farmer even wants to use it on his own facility, he's going to have to apply to NIE for a spill out and for the maximum that you could possibly do for safety reasons. And this is where the problem is. Even though he could use most of it at his own facility, he still have to.
He's not allowed to do that.
The only other way is off grid completely. That they will disconnect you off.
Just Chris, you very briefly, if you could come in, because there's other members looking to come in here.
I just want to I know where Paul's coming from. You're coming from. It was actually rural development funding.
Yes.
Farm diversification 3.1. There was a requirement that was actually within that said that you would be given a 50% grant for the building of a wind turbine to go on your farm, but the condition was you had to export 100% of your electricity. That's where the dual connection.
It's not even that. It's the fact that there's a licensing issue. I think there's a safety issue with NIE. They won't allow it.
Yes, but that is not a problem. If Gary has a 50 kilowatt wind turbine on his farm, he can still use the electricity himself if he built it himself, if he didn't avail of his funding, and also export the excess onto the grid and get his rocks. That is not a problem at the moment.
Are you sure?
Yes. Dual connection is something that's come under 3. Bartley has one on his farm at the moment.
We have a small scale wind turbine on our own farm, and there's not a problem there.
So you can actually supply a shed with the energy created through your wind.
Oh, well, we're using it in an overall farm situation, but
the energy's coming direct from it into your farm,
straight to the meter board.
All right.
Dual connection it was a condition that was under farm diversification 3.1, and it's not a problem at the moment because that's gone.
And it's not an issue with NIE?
Well, it was an issue with NIE, and a lot of guys didn't get funding because NIE would not give a dual connection for health and safety reasons.
Yes.
But it's not a problem if I was to want to build a wind turbine to use some of the electricity and sell the excess. Right. But that happens every day with guys putting turbines up around the country.
Okay, thanks for that.
Let me check out.
Mr. Douglas, Sammy.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks so much for the presentation. I had a couple of questions, but I think they've been answered already. And hopefully you haven't touched on this question. It's just a point of information because it was so my apologies. Are there any existing examples of microgrids operating in either the Republic of Ireland or elsewhere in the United Kingdom? Would be asked for Chris.
Not that I know of, Sammy. I know Local's going to be the first of its type here, in the UK at least. We're looking at America, the US for example. Harvard and Princeton, they're all microgrids as well.
There's one demonstration, 11 kVA isolated grid system in the UK in Norfolk, which is including storage. It's got to manage storage. It's only the one demonstration type one at the moment. How that's doing, I'm not sure, but it's.
Okay. Thanks so much. That's my question.
Okay, thank you. Sydney?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Chair. I'll be as brief as possible. Thank you for your presentation. There's a letter here you've updated us with in relation to conditional offers. Gary and NIE have withdrawn the offers, the ones that's sitting around. What's the significance in all that now? How do you see that going forward? Is it now a case of only offers coming forward will be ones that they can guarantee to connect?
First and foremost, the most important thing is, and we've had this clarified by the utility regulator, is that you're not going to lose your place in the queue if you want to go ahead. However, what will sort of stop your project going ahead is if they find at the end of the day it's going to cost several £1 million to upgrade the substation, and that's where we can identify some people are going to be pretty much very annoyed. However, what this has created is more certainty, because whenever you had conditional offers, guys didn't know whether or not the project was going to actually go ahead.
So it has given more certainty to a lot of people.
Yes, because before guys just did not know, whereas now they're going to be told one way or another.
Yeah, I think what our information, are they now under the impression that they're going to get a connection, or are they just still stacking up in the queue?
No, the NIE are working through the applications to tell people yes or no. Which is what they weren't able
so there's no guarantees as yet. They're just working through them.
Yes, and it's work in progress, which is more favourable than what it was whenever.
Well, it's better than what it was.
Yes.
Yes, but really, it's
movement.
Not down. It's movement in the right direction.
Yep.
With the help of obviously utility regulator and all who's.
The improved heat map is going to be crucial.
Yes, that's my colleague. Yeah, you talked about earlier on. That's fine. That's okay. That's not.
We heard a lot from various people about the planning permission issue. That the NIE won't touch or really get engaged properly without planning permission being in place. What's your opinion about that? Do you think they should move on and at least make some effort to try and help farmers and potential developers in relation to an application before it's, I suppose, it's finalised?
We have gone on the record as saying that we believe we should be the same as what it is in GB, because in GB you can basically work to have a grid connection at the same time you work to have planning application.
None in parallel.
We're in parallel, whereas here you have to have one before the other.
Yeah. That's still a big issue, really.
Big issue.
Because planning can take so long, if we all know.
And then you're waiting for a queue system, and you could just be, your whole business things have been changed by a few weeks, and missing out a few weeks. Somebody else in front of you, that's you finished, but you do not have any control on that. You cannot do anything, to improve your situation on it. So it's just a lottery, and it's not a very good way to manage it. Somebody comes in front of you, that's you out.
There's a planning
system. At least we can allow people on at a smaller scale, and it'll be the last person on, it'll be the first off, and the situation too that at least they'll have some hope of getting on. Maybe not as big as their expectations is, but at least that it'll move forward in a more prosperous way. That the grid is better managed at its present state, and then we'll have to look at then in the next state of how do we move the renewable sector in totality forward.
Yeah.
Adding to this. Because there doesn't seem to be no issue in town. That's just what the issue with them. We don't accept this project, this system to present. There is nothing else. And that's the end of your renewables in Northern Ireland. And there's no point carrying on.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Mr. McKinney, Fergal.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation and answers. You already touched on the storage thing. Can you just tell me a wee bit about the compressed air storage?
That's something the conversation we need to have with Bean Island, David Surplus. We are looking at more of a short-term solution in the form of second life traction batteries, which would be, dare I say, off the record, on the record, something that would be coming out. Say, for example, Wrightbus. Wrightbus have a large amount of batteries that have no life after they've come out of the Boris bus. And if you had a large number of those batteries, they could be a possible storage solution on farm.
You're taking that
Possibly in the back of a large lorry, but that is one way that we're looking at storage at the moment. And it'd be achievable a lot quicker than what compressed air storage will, because that's still very much a work in progress.
And what would the efficiency of the battery, formerly used? What do you call it? Is it refurbed, or what is what's the expression?
Well, the situation with curtailment, as we believe it, NA will be able to give us, give the developer person an idea what curtailment they're facing. They're calculating. There's quite a complex situation, but they're able to calculate what they perceive the curtailment may be in that line, looking over previous history of loads and that. And the situation would leave the person, rather than investing hundreds of thousands in a grid connection that you do not own or have any ownership or whatsoever to, is to invest in a reasonable grid connection and then a system between you and NIE which would you produce your energy from one or two sources, and if NIE notified you to say, right, we have an overload system on the line at present coming up shortly, you're going to have to curtail your production back, or you're going to have to switch off. But for the storage to come in, that would take that oversupply, that 10, 15, 20 kilowatt that may be interfering with overall load on the line, and store that for two. You can buy in 1, 2, 3 or 4 hour capacities. You can block it up to whatever you think your need is. Then when production or demand would change on the line, that would be fed back in. It wouldn't be stored as what they call shaving. So you're shaving off slight overproduction. If you happen to go very high over, then you'll face switch off. But that's NIU will be able to give the developer an indication.
Yes,
that's what we're waiting for.
But it's back to Paul's point about the security of supply. And if you're off, let's say for whatever reason, you have to rely on the battery to supply your area. How long can it do that for? What's the stress testing done on that?
I think sort of at the moment on farm level, you wouldn't want to be relying upon this purest battery. You would still have a generator. There'd still be a diesel generator sitting there as backup.
Well, what about the village?
The village, well, that would be that type of solution would be like Lacal, whereby you would have the compressed air storage system. That was more focused towards a village solution as opposed to the second life traction battery would be a farm solution, i.e. one small business as opposed to one small village.
Oh yes, sorry, but I was dealing with the kind of the Lacal solution and just in general. So just back to the original point then, how efficient is the compressed air system as it would apply to that bigger microgrid project?
Oh yes, B9 tell me it's a very efficient system. It's possibly the most efficient system that can work alongside renewable energy as far as storage is concerned.
And I suppose, I assume from your previous answers then that it compares much more favourably to anything to do with batteries.
Yeah. Whereas battery is a small-scale on-farm solution.
Yeah. Has anybody done anything about then the export of the battery from the farm to elsewhere, if there was a greater uptake of battery usage in cars, etc.? In other words, you get the milk lorry leaving the farm in the morning and the battery lorry leaving the farm in the morning.
I think that's more of a long-term consideration.
But
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
The main thing we're trying to achieve here, what NIA don't like, is voltage spiking. This is the big problem, and what they do is they create a lot of capacity for this, unused capacity. So there's quite a bit of capacity in the system, but in case for safety reasons that you have a voltage spike, and at the present, the producer doesn't have to control that. NIA accepts these, but we're saying if these are controlled on site and managed and not entering the grid, that it will create more capacity for the NIA has less risks to take. And these are things now where we're trying to maybe transfer more onus onto the producer of energy. And spending some of his excess capital that he had to spend on the grid and something that he could actually sell, or was an asset value, or could lease. The unit of storage, batteries or whatever, would be leasable.
Yeah, just on that point, because I know what the concept about the battery and the saving the electricity. But should that be placed? Should that onus be placed on the community and on the generator, the individual generator, renewable generator, or should that be something that, as a concept, NIE should be doing, Sony, EirGrid, whoever should be doing anyway throughout their system? And the second part of that question is, are we going the wrong way in this? Should we not be looking at interconnection throughout Europe as opposed to trying to go the other way?
Can I answer that, Paul? Yeah. To answer the first part of your question, again, we have opened up the debate in terms of storage, and my last press article in Farming Life did actually ask the question. Said we should have had the conversation about storage 4 or 5 years ago, whenever 4 ROCs were introduced. So we're pushing that along at an organisation level. Your second question in relation to interconnection, well, we've seen Moyle's only working 25% at the moment. You know, yes, it's already there, but if that was working properly, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah, and the North-South Interconnector, of course, is failed. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil, you're back with us here, so
Go on ahead.
Are you okay? Right, Rob. You're getting there. So, okay, well, gentlemen.
If you are going to close it, I will ask one question. With my mouth full, I hope answer you can understand me.
I can understand you anyway.
There's usually sounds like I was spot in my mouth. I'm sorry I missed your presentation. I will go and read answer, but I'm sure nobody's asked this question. There's a perception in the non-farming community that small-scale wind is the new subsidy for the farming community, and it's replaced the sale of a site for a bungalow. How would you respond to that?
PPS 21.
I think there's probably another angle to it as well. I think we did mention it earlier on, that the issue of carbon emissions. I mean, that it's another factor that farmers are going to have to. It is going to play a big role going into the future. That we do have to reduce our carbon emissions big time, and certainly we would see the whole renewable sector as contributing largely to that. And I mean, renewable energy, I don't think you can compare it really to the sale of a building site.
Okay.
I mean, it's a definite contributing factor to any farm business. And I think if we get the level of the right size of generation going onto farms, I think that is the key factor. That with suitable capacity on farms, yes, I think it can play a very big role, and can be a contributing factor to the whole Northern Ireland economy, not just to the farmers' economy.
And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, I'm definitely not. But am I reading into that what you're maybe referring to is that small-scale renewable developments aren't in wider society's benefits as much as larger-scale ones would be?
No, I'm saying the other way around. I would say that sort of small to medium size are of much more benefit
to the wider electricity consumer base,
and to the whole community. Yeah, and that the grid could possibly cope with it better.
Interesting.
Okay.
Thanks for that.
Right, gentlemen, thanks very much for your time. There's a few issues there that maybe we asked and maybe they were sprung on you a wee bit there. So if you want to contribute by way of sending further additional information into us, there were a few issues were a wee bit unclear. So if you wanted to expand on that by supplementing that with further technical or other information to us, that would be very welcome indeed. So, okay, so thanks very much for your time. It's good to see you. Thank you.
Fascinating.
Yep.
Gerald, just on that, would it help if we sent us from Union a copy of Hansard?
Yeah.
Just to, so that
I just know.
routine is there.
All right, you'll get that routinely anyway. Copy of the Hansard to keep you abreast of the issues. Okay. Thanks very much, Doug.
Chair, on that too, I think there's a couple of those issues there we need to chase on.
Yes.
And we can't really rely on coming back to us. I think there's a couple of fundamentals there that we need to get our heads around. The dual connection stuff.
Jim's just suggesting whenever we come to the electricity review report that we could deal with that. That'll be grand. Okay, we'll move then very quickly to agenda item number 6, matters raising. There are 4 items for matters raising. The index is at page 57. Your details here. Okay. Now. And papers are from pages 58 to 60.
Can I just commend, Chair? Can I just commend the matters raising page on pages 57? That's exactly.
Yes. I want to commend the page or the people that have done it.
Sorry, the people for the page. That's better.
Maybe just if we could have just the page numberings, the items that.
Sure, that isn't possible because it goes into the packs, and then once the packs are finished, the numbers are automatically generated. So it's
God. Right. Well, anyway,
they are on the page beside.
It was an idea.
Like constructive criticism, Jim. Let's take it well. I agree with Paul. I think it's a great addition to the pack. But if you look at the agenda, for example, if you go on your pack and click agenda number 3, it brings you to it. Is there any way we can include a hyperlink within the matters raising index?
It's included in the previous page.
The hyperlink.
But it's not in the table. No, you can't do it with the table.
No, and again, it's because it's the last thing put in and then other things go in.
Oh, well.
I think you're a bit petty there, fella. Thank you for your
I'll
support.
back you to the hill, Paul. Even if your party don't, I'll back you to the hill.
Somebody disappeared there. Right, okay. Table today for members' consideration, again, is the invite from Northern Ireland Assembly Business Trust, offering members the opportunity to participate in an educational visit to Brussels from Monday the 17th to Wednesday the 19th. Also included in the papers is a programme and the current attendance list. So, there we have
What page here? What's it? Table papers? No.
Table papers, aye. Okay.
2 trips, isn't it?
No, we'll come to the other one in a minute here. It sounds very technical.
It does, doesn't it?
So, right.
No interest in that innovation conference, Patsy, no?
I'm not so sure about it. Well, it sounds that they're looking us to take on a role, the committee to take on a role, like the organising bits and pieces of it too. So, it was for last week. It was a wee bit bizarre. The response we got, you know. I know if I could express an interest in the Assembly Business Trust one, it sounds very interesting. Myself personally as chair. So, anyone else interested in attending?
Well, I've already signalled my interest in attending, Patsy.
Right.
I've been on it before, and I think it's very useful.
Right.
And I think this year will be very informative, given the fact that there's so much change done with the Commission and with the election.
And I see there's the Scotland post-referendum issue and all that would be interesting. So, anyone else interested in attending?
I'm also nominated now to the Committee of the Regions Chair, and as a substitute member. It might be valuable, but maybe I could discuss with yourself after. Or just
do you want to?
Well, I would be interested in going, but I'm just wondering from a party perspective, is that overloading that?
We've gone before out to Brussels on the Horizon 2020 stuff, and it was very interesting. So, anybody else interested in going?
Yeah.
Well, are you looking to bring a delegation from the committee as well?
Yes.
Well, is there anything that if the committee went as well, that the committee could do separate to this programme that might be of major interest to the committee? And Jim,
fairly
interested in that.
The Northern Ireland Assembly and Business Trust programme is funded by NIABT, and it's separate from the committee. If the committee were going to do their own thing, then that would have to be separate and funded by the committee. So to do those two things at the same time maybe wouldn't be wholly appropriate. Now, it is, as I said, for members who do wish to go to it, it's just a matter of members individually contacting the Assembly and Business Trust and arranging that.
Right, okay.
Is there a deadline? Because obviously they'll have a chat to Gordon.
Is Gordon, is he coming back, is he? No.
When was
They're still there, aye.
I'll come back to you
There
on
is a
this.
deadline of 11th October or something, or maybe earlier than that.
I do think it helps. You know, as a member of the Trust Board, it certainly helps if there's a strong representation from across each of the political parties there. It certainly looks bad if there's a small number of MLAs there. And I think it would be appreciative if parties could send at least one representative, you know.
Talk to our party.
Right, okay. So, now, I think maybe you have to notify them by a certain time or something.
Yeah.
I saw some email came out and about there that maybe is Ivor doing the bookings by the end of this week or something. So it was sent to you. So, anybody else that's interested in going from the committee or on behalf of the committee, if they had notified Jim or Angela here ASAP, please.
Sorry, Chair, if they would notify ever directly, I think it's yeah, it's not committee related, it's a separate thing. So if you contact the Assembly Business to Ivor on the first floor.
Right. So, but anybody who has decided, you'll relay that through to them.
Yeah, I'll be
today,
speaking to him anyway.
that who's from membership of this committee's interested in going. Okay, that's grand. Thank you. Now, next item, agenda item number 7.
Right, Patsy, can I just take you back to the roof project?
The roof project.
And the roof project. Would it be possible to speak to Stephen sometime? There's not really much point up at the minute because they haven't really done anything, but at some stage can we try and get a visit onto the roof to actually see what renewables projects they're going to put in?
Sure we could. Health and safety provided.
But can we check with Stephen, see if that's something he could facilitate someday?
Until it's done.
Dennis believe.
Oh, I know, aye.
At some stage
I don't
where
even know
it's
how
nearly
to-
done, or
Have they got anything
towards
done
done,
on the
but
roof?
there's no point in up at the minute for the still tower in the roof, but at some stage there'll be something useful to do in the future to see.
That's
see something
grand.
work.
Good idea.
Okay. Agenda item number 7, written briefing from DETI on the DETI website and online presence. So that's an update from them there. Members content to note? Great. Agenda item number 8, written briefing from DETI, Programme for Government, Year 3, Quarter 1 Progress Report. That is from page 63 onwards. And I think maybe there's some issues here. I really don't know what 300 and it refers there to the promotion of 2,500 jobs. I don't know what owned rebalancing means. Locally owned rebalancing. I'm not sure what that phrase means. Maybe we could get clarity from the department as to what that means. I think I know what it means, but I don't know what it means.
Sure, the economic strategy is broken down into rebalancing and rebalance.
Yes.
So that's in relation to the rebalancing side of the economic strategy.
All right.
And it's locally owned organisations.
Businesses. Aye. And rebalancing means what? What are they rebalancing?
Transfer stuff from the private sector or the public sector to the private sector under the guise of new money.
Is that what that means?
That's what I read into it.
Could maybe get that clarified from the department as to what that means? Please. Thank you.
Was there any chance of getting one of them red, amber, green things they usually give you? Because this is blue and white.
Oh, we had that last week.
We had that last week?
Aye.
Right.
Some of it was a wee bit hard to understand too. So. Okay, is anything further to add about this? Content to note? Agreed. Next item is agenda item number 9, which begins at page 77. That's a written briefing from the Tourist Board, and their operating plan begins at page 77. Unless members have anything further to add. Agreed that we note.
That's it.
Well,
two issues there. There's the issue of the Tourism Innovation Fund, which I raised with the Hotels Federation earlier on. Can we get a written briefing from the department on the rationale behind why they've scrapped that? I think on their website they put it down to budgetary pressures, but I think it'd be useful to hear from either the Tourist Board or the department as to why that's happening. Well, the second one is here. The very last line talks about the...
Phil, would you be content to leave that when the Minister's in and ask her if it's budgetary pressures?
When's that?
Well, we're waiting for her to come back to us with a date.
Chair, the other thing is obviously there's this meeting this afternoon. That'll have implications, big implications.
Right.
Well, it says in the tourism or in the Tourist Board website that the Tourism Innovation Fund is closed, and several people that went through the process of applying had contacted me to say that they've got a letter saying the whole thing's been scrapped. So I think it'd be useful to get clarification from.
Well, okay, we can get written clarification beforehand. Aye. Agreed.
And the second point is it's about the G8 legacy plan. I recollect that before the summer we were given information that DETI would produce some sort of an appraisal of G8 in June.
Aye, that's right.
And we still haven't got that, so can we chase that
Get an
up?
update on that, sure. Grand. Agreed then. Now else move to agenda item number 10, written briefing from Assembly Research on the Insolvency Amendment Bill. Research paper begins at page 84 and takes it through it all. It's quite detailed bit of stuff here. So
You'd be well reading the bill.
our members content to write to the stakeholders listed to request written evidence when the bill comes to the committee stage. Agreed. Agenda item number 11. This is the ISIM, high level design. I presume that's the pronunciation of it, isn't it?
Integrated Standard.
Aye, that's so it's ISIM. High level design decision document. That's from page 124 onwards. This was the issue that was been touched upon there about cross-border trading of wholesale energy and the likes. Now what we've got is a covering letter from the utility regulator at page 125, Final decision, paper 127, non-technical summary, page 147, next steps, paper 154. Two further papers are available from the committee office should member wish to review these, and these are a decision, impact assessment and a summary of responses papers. Now, if members are content to proceed as suggested by the utility regulator, and her suggestion is that she would be pleased to keep the ETI committee advised on progress of the project. Happy enough with that approach? Good. Agreed. Thank you. Next item then is correspondence. 8 items of correspondence. The index is page 162. All right. Just get it here. 162. And Jim, do you want to take us through this, please? Unless the first...
Sorry, Chair. The table of correspondence, it's been changed as suggested last week, so I just asked members if, in regards to the correspondence,
are they content with
the action?
Yeah. Agreed.
There's one additional item in relation to action point 5.
Right.
If members are content to forward that, a copy of that to Detty.
Right. Okay. That's grand.
Great.
That's me writing to me.
Nice.
I know it is. Right. Okay. Next item is any other business. If there's any additional items of business before we move to closed session. No.
That's it.
Yeah, Phil.
You might have read in the Irish News today that RT are closing their long wave transmitter, and as such, RT are closing the long wave transmitter for RT Radio 1, and as such, many people in the north won't be able to listen to RT Radio 1, particularly affecting people in Antrim and down and around Belfast. And I think that's a regrettable move. It was not
the long wave.
You know, the 252 on long wave. You probably listen to between 87 and 89 FM. But if you come into
medium wave.
Well, the medium wave closed 6 years ago.
Oh, right. Well, it must be FM that I'm listening to her.
But if you notice, if you're coming up the road to Stormont, say, it cuts off there about Saintfield,
right,
and you can't get it. You have to go on to Longwave. But they're now saying they're going to switch that off in 4 weeks. So people in the north, in certain areas, won't have access to RT Radio 1 now. RT's response is saying, well, you can listen to it online, or you can listen to it on your TV, or you can listen to it on a DAB radio. But that's not practical for an awful lot of people, particularly people that are in cars. So I think it'll be useful if this committee, which has responsibility for telecoms policy in the north, could write to the Director General of RTE and asking them to reconsider this decision, and if they are going to insist on removing the long wave transmitter, that they discuss with Ofcom the possibility of getting some sort of improved FM coverage in the areas affected of Antrim and down.
Definitely.
Because it is an issue I wrote to RTE a couple of weeks ago to try and sort out FM coverage in this area. So I think it'd be useful if we could write to the Director General of RTE, as well as the Minister in the South, Alex White, and John O'Mahony, the Chair of the Transport and Communications Committee.
Yeah, that would be appropriate, and also pass on correspondence to Ofcom about it as well.
Yeah, it'd be useful to see if they've had any discussions with RTE about freeing up FM space, because there's quite a number of stations in the Belfast area that operate at that frequency, so they need to sort it out somewhere.
Agreed then. Thank you. Agreed. Next meeting then, that'll be Tuesday. The next full meeting will be Tuesday, the 7th of October, in room 29, Parliament Buildings, at 10 a.m. Obviously next week, just to refresh members' memories, we're on a visit to South Derry Coachworks. Okay? Right. That's grand. Can we move then?
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly